In this section, we're going to go over saving our files for print. In the last section, I went over coloring our design, and we colored this awesome motorcycle design for the Udemy course, and it was tons of fun. But now we might want to get it printed, right? And our print shops have strict guidelines sometimes. They want specific file types. They might ask you for a PSD, an AI file, whatever it may be. But majority of the print shops are going to want an AI file, which is a vector file. They might want an EPS, a PDF, or just an AI file. So you basically just have to talk to your print shop in order to figure out what they want. But once you figure out what that information is, you can go ahead and save your design. Illustrator makes it really easy for them to separate each part of the design by color. So you don't really have to worry about that too much unless they ask you for it. Then you just put each color on its own layer. So to give you guys an example, let's say this is a red color. I'm going to make it really bright so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So this is a red color. If they want you to separate that onto its own layer, what you do is you just select it, cut it, and then you would go to the new layer, and then you'd paste that in place. So now that it's pasted in place, it's on its own layer, you can name that red or whatever. So they know what layer that is. So now it's on its own layer, and then this black is already on its own layer, so we can name that black. So that's how you would color separate something. All you want to do to save this is go up to File, Save As, and you can save this as whatever you want. So you can name it whatever you want. So type out whatever it is, and then you want to actually change the Save As file type. So right now it's on AI, and it's definitely worth saving your design as an AI file anyway, because if you're planning on editing it later on, you want to make sure you have an AI so you can pull it right back up in Illustrator and make those edits. So a lot of times what I would just do is go to PDF and save it as a PDF, and then go to Illustrator, EPS, and save it as an EPS. So I have 3 different file types. I have an AI, a PDF, and an EPS for them. So when they go to print the file and you send them all the files, they're going to have all 3, so there's no way you can fail. They have every single file they're going to need. In the next section, I have a bunch of bonus tutorials plus a bunch of resources that you guys can download to help you out, and I'll be updating that section very, very often, so keep checking back. I hope you guys enjoyed this section. Bring it over to our new artboard so we can start coloring it. So I'm going to make sure everything's selected, and I'm basically grouping it. So I'm doing Control G to group it, and then I'm going to recenter it. And then I also want to make sure all the text is outlined. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Shift Control 0. The only thing else you really have to worry about is make sure your strokes are expanded. So to do that, you just go up to Object and Expand Appearance, and you need to do that a few times, and then click OK once the Expand menu pops up. So sometimes you do have to do it a few times. I do it up to 3 times just to make sure everything's expanded correctly. And once that's expanded, what you can do is you can ungroup everything now. And this is where the fun really happens. We just need to group certain things together so we can basically color them at the same time. So we have our t-shirt design group right here. We have our master class group right here. And we also have the bottom text. So we just want to group everything that's going to be the same exact color. And I think what I want to do is make master class and t-shirt the same group, as well as the left and right 1991. So we're going to group all that together. So now it's all grouped. So if you move it, you can see that it's grouped. Now what we could do is we could just go up to our color right here, right on the right hand side of group, and we can go down to our color palette, and we can actually select our color palette now simply because we added it to our swatches. And that's the reason why we added it to our swatches. Now, if we didn't add it to our swatches, what we would have to do is go to our eyedropper, and we'd have to go over here and basically eyedrop a color, which is also equally as easy, but I just prefer to do it this way. I don't like the color of this yellow. It's more of like a mustard, I would say, and I just don't like it. It's not very pleasing to me. So what I want to do is I want to double click on the color right here, which is the foreground color fill. You just want to double click on it, and it's going to pull up this color picker, and you can alter the color on your own. And I actually like doing this sometimes because sometimes you just don't get the color you exactly wanted or envisioned. So now I'm just going to change it. I'm going to click OK. And I like the darker color, but it's still not something I wanted. So what I want to do is just go to an off black. We're going to make this an off black. We're going to go with the traditional gold and black color. So the bike's going to be the gold color instead. The next thing I would like to do is select the bike and group it with everything else that's going to be the same color, because we're going to have 2 different colors here essentially. And so I want to select everything that I want the same color. So I'm basically doing original Udemy course, the bike, and the speed marks, and I'm also going to select the background of Charley Pangus right here, and we're actually just going to do Control G again and group it. In case you guys didn't notice, my name at the bottom disappeared, and that's simply because when we grouped it, it added in front of it, and we just don't want that. So we need to right click, go to arrange, and we can send it backward and it will actually appear again. The next part's kind of tricky because what's going to happen is when you change the color, it's going to literally keep everything one solid fill. And I'm just going to demonstrate it because it's easier to show you. So I'm going to make it this color. And as you can see, all the detail of the bike disappeared, and there's also some other things that disappeared as well. There is one way around that. We can use the live paint bucket tool to actually color this instead of doing it the way I just showed you. So in order to do that, you need to go to your paint bucket, which can be found right here under Shape Builder tool. It's live paint bucket. So making sure that the objects that you want to color are selected, now you can go hover over anything that you want to recolor, and you just left click on it and it's going to recolor it. So it's really easy to do it this way, because if we did it the other way, it'd be a little tedious and we'd have to kind of go through everything, and it would be kind of a pain, to be honest with you guys. And there's times I use that method, but for this type of design, I think this is the easiest way to do it. And it's really up to you, but definitely experiment with that. The other way, if we would have did it that way, we would have just had to go through and delete things to make it show through, to make the objects show through, because obviously it added it as a solid fill, and we didn't want that, which made all the detail of the bike disappear. So now we're just individually selecting things, and I think this is, like I said, the easiest way to do it. So now what I want to welcome to our second project. In the last project, we went over designing a motorcycle graphic, which looked really vintage and awesome. And in this one, we're going to be doing this badge type eye design. And it may look crazy at first, and it looks super complicated, but I promise you it's a lot more simple than you may think. We're just going to be using shapes and the Pathfinder tools and the rounding tools to basically create this final version on the right hand side here. And it's, like I said, really simple. You know, we have a text path, we have a rectangle that has a warp to it. You guys can actually download this in this course before beginning if you want. That way you have it as a reference. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new artboard. Now you guys are probably going to start off on a fresh artboard, so you might not need to do this, but it's always good to create a few artboards just to have them at your disposal. So all you have to do is go to the right of layers and you can find your artboards right there. And also make sure Pathfinders is on, so make sure that's toggled. We're going to be using that in this, so it's definitely important. And everything else is really stuff we already went over. So the first thing I like to do is I want to create these shapes right here. So what we would probably want to do is just create the eye so it's ready, and also the keyhole, just so we have it. So we're going to do that first. Now what I want to do is just go to ellipse. We need to drag out 2 ellipses. And remember, we can either use the Pathfinder or we can use Shape Builder to create this eye shape. So I'm actually going to use the Shape Builder because I believe it's a little easier to use. So we're just going to hold in Alt and also hold in Shift so it doesn't steer away from the axis here. It's going to snap into place when you hold in Shift. And if you let go of Shift, it will not snap into place as easy. But if you hold in Shift, hold in Alt, you can duplicate it, dragging down. And then if you just let go, it will actually create that duplicate. Let me do it one more time, guys. If I select the object I want to duplicate, hold in Alt. So while holding in Alt, you just drag down and then hold in Shift right after that, and it will snap into place. And then you just drag it down and let go with your left click. And now you have 2 copies, okay? So now you have 2 ellipses, essentially. And now what we need to do is just go to our Shape Builder, and we just need to hold in Alt one more time and delete the top and bottom because we don't need those. Now we have this perfect eye shape, which is awesome because we will use that, you know what I mean? So, and what it's going to do is it's most likely going to create a copy. I'm not sure why it does that. I think it's just because maybe I accidentally held an Alt an extra time, but put that off to the side for now. And the next thing I want to do is just actually add a stroke instead of the fill, because we will be using that stroke. So we're just going to make it kind of a thick stroke for now. It's going to be like maybe like an 8 for now, and we're going to make it a black stroke. Okay, so now we have that, and now we need to create the keyhole as well, and that's like super easy to do. So we're just going to draw one more ellipse for this keyhole, and we need to make that a fill. So we can just change the arrows right here. We could just swap fill and stroke, and that's going to make it a solid. And then we can go to rectangle, and we just need to drag out a rectangle real quick, and it doesn't really matter what shape it is. We can actually use the alignment tools to center them, and I think that's aligned to artboard. Yes, it is. Okay, that's good. Now what I want to do is go to my direct selection tool, and I just want to select the bottom points. I'll select the right one first, and I want to go over 10 times. So I want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on my right arrow key. On the left arrow key, I want to go 10 as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now we have this keyhole shape, and we can even go in 1 on the top on each side. So 1 and then 1. And we'll look at it, see if it's all right. It's looking pretty good. We can even go in a little bit more. We could do 2 more. 1, 2 on each side. 1, 2. I don't mind that keyhole shape. So now what I want to do is go to my Pathfinder and just merge these 2 shapes together so it's one shape. And then now what I could do is I can actually create one more ellipse and add that in the center of the eye here. Because remember, in this version of the design, we have a circle for the pupil, so we're going to do the exact same thing. And we're trucking along here, guys. We're doing pretty good. What we can do is go to Align to Selection, and we're just going to align those together. And we also need to make this a stroke, so we're just going to swap the fill and stroke again. And we can go to our eyedropper tool. And the cool thing about the eyedropper tool is you can actually copy different stroke widths just by using it. A lot of people typically use it for colors, like basically if you want to select a specific color, you can use the eyedropper tool and it will actually select that color or copy that color. But what I like to do is I like to use this for strokes as well. So since this circle that we have here is not the same stroke, we can use that eyedropper tool, hover over the other stroke, and then just left click and it's going to copy that stroke. How beautiful is that? And we will make this stroke a lot thicker later on, but we're not worrying about it yet. So now we just need to resize the keyhole and put it in place in the center here. So if you just hold in shift, you can actually drag it down evenly without it warping or anything like that. So you just drag it into place and kind of figure out how big you want it. I'm going to resize it one more time, and then we can center everything as well, just like we learned in the previous sections. And that's just simply because we want to make sure everything's obviously looking nice and neat. And we can group that together for now and kind of just hide it because we will be using it in a minute. Now we're going to worry about the badge shape on the outside, which looks complicated like I said previously, but it will make more sense in a second. So now what I'm going to do is I already have this shape, so I'm going to keep that at my disposal, and I'm actually going to duplicate it one more time because keep in mind we're using this eye right here for this part just to give it some decoration on the top and bottom, as you can see. And then this one is going to be used to create the top part of this badge shape. And then this one right here will be used for the center. So I'm just basically preparing everything ahead of time just so I'm ready to go. So now all we need to do is go to our rectangle and we need to draw out a rectangle. Now I'm going to copy the same size over here. So I'm just going to drag one out. Just make sure yours looks pretty similar to this. That way it doesn't look all weird and off. So basically we just want to make it about that big. We can actually hold in the space bar and we can move it around if you don't like the positioning of it. Basically I want to go to the bottom where this round arc part starts, and once I see that I can let go. So now I have my rectangle, and then now I need to resize my eyes as well. So I'm just going to take my eye, I'm going to drag it on top, and we're just going to resize it to make it everything looking the same because we're trying to keep the same dimensions and everything. And we can also center that because it's not centered right now, and then I can move that up a little bit. So as you guys can see, I'm just really messing around with everything. Don't take everything so seriously, just have fun. Now we just want to duplicate it and put it at the bottom real quick, just like this. And we can actually group those now and actually align them vertically. That way they are perfect, and we can align this vertically as well, so everything looks nice and neat. And now we can select everything at once and move it back to our other artboard, okay? So now we are ready to start using it to create that badge shape that we see over here. And it's got rounded corners, and I already taught you guys how to do that. So we're going to use the rounded corner anchor points to round these corners really easily. So now what I can do is I can select everything and just merge it together, and I can also add a stroke to it, and we're going to make that a black stroke. And we just want to go up on our stroke width. We're going to go to, let's say 7, 6, let's do 7 for now. We might go thinner than that. So now what we want to do is we actually want to round the corners. So we want to select each corner real quick, and we're not going to round anything else. We're just going to use our direct selection tool to select each corner, and we're just going to round it just like this. So just until it like kind of turns red, and once it turns red you can let go. And as you can see, we have that same shape going, and it's going to make more sense in a second, but that's basically how we did the full border of this badge. So now we have the foundation already down, and we can start adding to it just by adding these banners, the eye, the circles, and everything like that. So we're doing really good, guys. Now the next thing I would like to do is we can actually put our eye in place just to see where it needs to sit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and resize it real quick. And this is where we're going to have to mess with the stroke width probably, but it's okay. So you just want to make sure it's centered, and once it's centered, you're good. And that's why you use your alignment tools, because you want to just use those to make sure everything's perfectly centered. Now what I want to do is I just basically ungrouped everything, and I'm just selecting the strokes on the outside, and I want to go down a lot with it because it's way too thick. We can go to a 7 stroke. And I think the outside is a 7 stroke. So yeah, we're sticking with a 7 stroke, which is good because now everything's pretty consistent so far. And now we could group everything again. And then we could double check the centering just to make sure it is centered, and it is. Now we could drag that down to the bottom, just like so. Now we have it at the bottom. So it's a really easy process, guys. We're just really building this design from the ground up, and we're gonna keep adding to it. So now what I wanna do is add these rectangles, which look difficult, but they are super, super easy. And I'm also going to introduce you guys to a new tool in a second here. So what I want to do now is drag the rectangle out. And again, if I hold in the space bar, I can actually drag it anywhere I want. So instead of doing this, if I hold in the space bar, it will actually stop from transforming, and it will allow you to move it around the artboard, which is cool. So that gives us a lot of freedom to kind of just place it where we want. I just placed it on top of this banner so I can see kind of the general size I need to make it. And that's actually looking pretty good right there. I don't need it to be too big. So on this version, I had a lot of top and bottom room, which I could have fixed that like really easily. So I'm probably going to make it around this size for now. And then we just have to go up to Effect, and then we want to go to Warp, and then Arc. And we just figure out kind of what arc we want on this. And I think that looks pretty good right there. So I'm going to click OK. Now we have an arc, and what we could do is we can go up to Object, and we can expand Appearance. Now when you do that, it's going to make it a stroke, and it's not going to allow you to add the arc anymore. If you add an arc now, if you add a warp effect, it will make this look really funky, so don't do that. So now it's acting like a stroke, just like everything else that we have so far. So that's really good. Now I'm going to introduce you guys to a new tool, and it allows us to actually take strokes and cut them, slice them in half to get rid of certain parts. So obviously right now we have these right sides hanging down, right? And that's kind of ugly. So what I can do is I can actually get rid of those by using the cut tool. So I can cut just this left side off and cut just this right side off. If I do that with the eraser, here's what happens. It actually follows the arc of whatever you just cut off, and it's really ugly. Unless you're going for that, it's completely fine. Like, you know, you could do some pretty cool stuff with that, but that's not the look I'm going for this tutorial. So what I want to do is I want to go to the eraser, click on it, and then go to the drop down menu and go to scissors, or you could just press C on the keyboard. And I'm going to zoom in real quick, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this part right here. So we're just going to cut the end parts off, and then watch what happens. When I actually select it, I can actually delete it. So now it's completely gone, and we can do the same thing for this other side, and it's really easy. So again, you just want to cut it. You kind of want to be careful. You don't want to cut the bad shape. It's pretty easy not to, because it will show the blue line where you're cutting. So just kind of pay attention to that. But if you do mess up, you could just do Control Z and go back. Not a big deal. So now I have my banner, and what I can do is I can group it now. And now I want to actually duplicate it and bring it down and flip it, okay? So we need to flip it horizontally. So what I want to do is hold in Alt and drag down, holding in Shift as well. That will lock it into the center there. You can either use the Reflect tool, or we could just right click and transform. And I think the easiest way for this one is just to right click and transform. So we're going to right click on our mouse, we're going to hit transform, and then we're going to go to reflect. Now once we do that, we're going to see a few options. We're going to see reflect horizontally, vertically, we can add angle and all that other stuff, but we don't want to do that. We just want to flip horizontally. Everything else can stay the same. And if you actually uncheck preview, you can see how it was before. Check it again, you'll see what it's doing, and then you click OK. And now you can actually drag it down and put it in place. And if you group them both together now, we can actually align them vertically, and that's basically perfect now. Now it's centered to our badge shape. Everything's nice and centered, and it's looking really uniform, and we are ready to move on to the centerpiece now. Now we can actually add the circle, the eye, and then we can start actually laying down some text as well. So now what we can do is add a circle to the center and use the cut tool again to get rid of it from the top and bottom banners. And I'll show you guys what I mean by that. So if I draw out an ellipse, it will basically bleed into my banners, and obviously we don't want that. So and I need to resize it just a little bit. So we're just kind of figuring out what size we want everything. And the next thing we want to do is we want to use the cut tool, because again, we want to cut it from the top. We don't want it bleeding into the banners on the top and bottom. So we just basically cut it. Once you select it, you just hit delete on your keyboard, maybe twice, and sometimes it doesn't just work the first time for some reason. And then we could do the same for the bottom. Delete. I said delete, but I meant cut. So cut, delete, delete, and you're good. So now we just have the circle in the center, and that's looking pretty good. I'm excited about this because it's all coming together like we wanted it. The next thing I would like to do is there is these little lines right here, right? And they're kind of looking like they're creating like a wing out of this top part and the bottom part, and that's actually really easy to do. All I did is I actually just duplicated the whole badge and brought it down. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the badge. So we're going to hold an Alt, drag down, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually go to Object and expand, because we don't want it to be a stroke anymore, okay? And that will make sense in a second. So now we don't want it to be a stroke, and we're going to duplicate it again. So now we have two of them, and we want to make sure they look sharp. So as you can see right here, they look sharp. So now we can actually select them both. And the reason why I actually expanded them is because now I'm going to use my eraser tool and I'm just going to delete what I don't want. And this is the easiest way to do that, in my opinion. So I'm just going to delete it. You could use the cut tool as well, like I just showed you, but I think deleting it just is the easiest way. So we're just going to delete it from the parts we don't want it at, and I'm just going to make sure it's not bleeding into anything. All right, so those are in place. Those are looking good. Now what we need to do is cut out the center part here. So what I want to do is draw out another circle real quick, and we don't want it to be a stroke. So if it has a stroke, just delete it real quick, and then we'll go from there. So let's actually just kind of copy the arc of the top of the top circle that's already there, and you guys will see that. And then we can actually change it to like a brighter color so we can see what's going on here, right? Because it's kind of hard to see. And we can just center that and kind of, reshape it to kind of fit, like I said, the arc of the eye as much as we can. That's actually good. So now what we could do is we can actually select everything that we just did. So we can select the duplicate badge copies that we just erased to create these wing looking shapes, and then we can create this, we can actually select the circle as well. So now we have the circle in place, and what we want to do is we want to select the circle and select the other shapes that we just duplicated using the the badge, and we can actually use a pathfinder on this if we wanted to. So if we actually hover over something and just hold an Alt, we can delete things that we don't want. So we're just going to delete everything that we don't want, and don't worry about the way those look right now. We will be rounding the corners. If we actually zoom in real quick, so all you have to do to round the corners is actually select each corner, and we could do all of them at the same time. So let me show you. So we're going to select all the corners real quick. And then we can actually take the, any white dot basically. It doesn't really matter which one you select, but hover over the white dot until you see the upside down smiley face or whatever, and then drag to the right, and it's going to round all of them at the same time. So now we have our shapes in place, and they are looking pretty good. So now what we want to do is we want to duplicate them and bring them to the bottom holding in Shift. Again, Shift just keeps it on the same axis so it doesn't go right or left, keeps it nice and centered. And basically we just transform them again, reflect. Now all we have to do is do transform, reflect, and reflect it horizontally. And we basically just did the same thing as we did for the banners. So now we have both of those shapes, and what we can do is we can group them now. And notice I'm grouping all the pairs of things together. So if I have two banners, I'm grouping all the banners, So it's up to you. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that. So moving on. Now what we want to do is we want to get these right and left parts together. And again, we're doing the same exact thing we just did for these top and bottom wing looking shapes. We're going to duplicate the badge here, and we're going to bring it to the left, and we're going to do this side first, and then once we're done with this side, we're going to flip it onto the other side, just like we just did with the other shapes. So now what we can do is expand it again. So click expand, OK. Once you have expanded that, what you can do is you can just take the eraser again and erase everything. We don't need it. Some people might think this is sloppy to do it this way, but it's just so much easier to do it this way. So that's the reason why I do it. Now we have that. It's looking pretty good. Let's select off of it and see what it looks like. It can actually be kind of resized. So if you select everything and hold an Alt and drag down, it will drag the top and bottom down. And you basically just want to fit it to the shape, just like this. And we can erase a little bit more just in case it's bleeding into the design in the center here. We don't want that. So I just erased it. It's still a little off, but it's okay. We can fix that later on. So now we have the left part down. We're going to duplicate it again, and then we're going to transform it. Right-click, transform, reflect, and this time we're going to reflect vertically instead of horizontally, and then click OK. Drag that into place. Beautiful. So just make sure it's dragged into place. You can group everything together, and then you want to align it to the artboard. And there is a little part down here that's kind of annoying. It's as you can see, it's not perfect. So what we could do is we could just resize it a little bit, and that should fix it, and it did. And we can actually recenter it to the artboard horizontally and vertically, and it's looking good now. So now we have the left and right sides done. These next parts are really easy. They just take a little bit of time. So what I did for the middle part is I just basically made a bunch of ellipses and resized them inside of each other with a tiny stroke, I think like a 2-pixel stroke. And I just kept doing that, and then I added the eye on top of that. And then for the corners here, I added, just using the line segment tool, some thin lines as well. So we're going to do the center first, and I'm going to do the outside last. So here we go. We're going to take a circle, ellipse. We're just going to drag it out. We want to make sure it's a stroke. So you could just swap the fill and stroke just like we did before and change it to like a 2-stroke. Now what we can do is we can actually copy everything, and we can paste it on top of each other. So we can paste in front or paste in place, really doesn't matter. And we're just going to keep dragging these in. So we can copy both of these now. Copy, copy, and then paste in front, and then drag those down. What I'm doing is holding in Shift and Alt, and that will proportionally drag it down so it stays centered. I'm not too worried about the spacing right now for the outside, but the inside I will have to adjust it a little bit. As you can see, it's getting smaller. We might not really want that, so we can just resize it manually. So I'm just going to select them real quick and do a little bit of resizing. Again, I'm holding in Shift and Alt, and that's resizing them proportionally. But you guys get the point, I think. So we are going to move on now. So now we have all of those circles with strokes, and we just basically kept duplicating them and then resizing them, and you know what I mean. So that's a lot of fun. So the next thing we can do is we can actually put those in place now. So we can just center them to the artboard. Whatever artboard it was originally on, if you drag it out here, it will remember what artboard it was previously on. So if I select it now, it will still go to that artboard. See what I'm saying? And if we do the same thing for this one, if we drag it onto this artboard, let go, and then we drag it off, here's what happens, watch. See, it remembered what artboard it was on. That's a really cool thing to know. It helps a lot. So now we're just gonna center it all the way, and then we're gonna look at it real quick, see what the spacing, how the spacing was. We definitely have more spacing now, but again, just for this tutorial, I think it's fine. It's important to keep track of what stroke you used on each element of this design so you can use it on other parts. For instance, on this, on these corners here, I want to use a 2-point stroke as well since I used it in the center. So now I can actually expand it since I remembered the stroke, and then we can just take the eraser tool and erase it where we don't want it. And once it's erased, we can kind of just check it out, make sure there's no lines leaking into the banner, because that would be bad, especially for print. And it is not leaking into the banner, so we are good. Now we can actually create these outside strokes, and those are really easy. You just take the line segment tool, which can be found right under the pen tool options, and you just want to drag out a line about yay big, and then you want to make it 2 points, just like we did previously with the circles. And we're going to create a bunch of those. So we need a ton of these. So we're just going to basically create a few, and then we're going to use those and duplicate them. Now I have my strokes. It's a 1.5. And I think that's good enough. We'll duplicate it all one more time just so we have plenty. And then now what we can do is we can select them all. We go up to our alignment options and click Align to Selection. And then what we want to do is we want to go to the vertical distribute center, and that will align them all together perfectly. So now they are good. And now what I want to do is create a duplicate copy just in case we mess up over here. So I'm just going to hold it all and duplicate them, and then we can expand it real quick. I know this is all going really fast, guys, but I promise you if you just practice, you will get it down. It will make more sense as you practice. So now you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm just building this design up as I go. So now what I want to do is just make sure everything's selected, take the eraser, and I'm just going to erase where I don't want these. So again, we're just kind of, we're just making it easy by using the eraser tool. We don't have to make it complicated. Because like I said, you could use the shape builder tool to erase them, but I found that using the eraser tool is just so much faster. Alright, so once you have erased around everything but the corners, once you just left the corners, now you have a design that looks like this. So all the strokes are still there. And again, all we did to accomplish that is just expanded them. We expanded the fill and stroke. That's important to keep in mind. And then we used the eraser tool and just erased everything we didn't want to show. Moving on, we made it so far, guys. Congratulations if you made it this far and you followed along. This is definitely a more complicated design, but I thought it was really important to show you guys something more complicated. I didn't want to do just super easy designs, so I hope you guys appreciate this. And if you are lost, do not worry, I'm here to help you. So the next part, we're going to move on to the eye. We already have the eye, like I told you guys before. We created a copy so we can use it in the center. So we're actually going to drag that into place now, and we actually want to send it in front of everything. The easiest way to bring this to the front is either Shift-Control-J or right-clicking, going to arrange, and then bring it to the front that way. And then we just want to center it real quick. The next thing we want to do is just resize it so it touches the edges on the left and right side. So let's do that real quick. Make sure it's centered. And now what we can do is change the fill to white, and we can copy the stroke of the outside here. So we're just actually going to copy the stroke just like that, and it will actually take away the fill that we just added just because we don't have a fill in the banner. We don't have a fill in the stroke, and if we click on it, you can see there's no fill. So that's why. Using the eyedropper tool, like I told you guys before, it copies the elements of whatever you're eyedropping. So because we didn't have that fill, it didn't add it to the eye that we use the eyedropper on. So that's the reason for that. Not a big deal. As you guys can see, we are changing it a little bit. So what I want to do is just resize the eye, hold an Alt and drag down. We're just resizing it a little bit to give it more breathing room, because on this design we have more breathing room on the top and bottom. So now that's looking good. And we also have a pupil that we don't have now, so we can include that pupil real quick. That's super easy. Just draw out an ellipse and it should copy the stroke, and it did. So now we have that stroke that's perfect, the same size as everything else that we just used on the eye. So now we have the pupil that's at a 7-point stroke, and we have the eye that's at a 7-point stroke. You guys can make it as thick as you want or as thin as you want. It's really up to you. And then the next thing we have is just another ellipse that's duplicated. So we're going to copy that real quick. Copy, paste in front again. And as you guys can see, I'm doing that a lot. And now we're just going to resize it. And we want to change the fill to a solid. So we're just going to swap the fill and stroke, just like we've been doing. And then we can also resize it again. And we can get rid of the stroke on this because there is still a stroke. And then we'll go look at the other one. We have a lot of spacing, so we're going to move it down a little bit. And that's looking good. And the next thing we did is we added some little circles right here to look like it has a glare on it. So we could just duplicate this one, turn it white, and then resize it real quick. We'll duplicate it one more time and add it to the right side and also resize it just so it's a little smaller, and just kind of put it wherever you think it needs to be. It really doesn't matter. You can just put it wherever you think. So I'm going to add mine right there. Now we just need to add these lines that you can see right here. I rounded them in the final, but if you look at the original, they're just line segments with some stroke on them. It's really, really easy. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take the line segment tool and draw out some lines. And we also need to make sure they're rounded. So if we go to our stroke options here, we could just round the cap and it will make them rounded. And then we actually need to change the stroke size because it's at a 7-point still, because it remembered what we used for the eye that we just put down. So we don't want that. We want to go down with it. We don't want them to be too big. So we can actually go with like let's say like a 5. I think that's good. And then what we want to do is just kind of drag them into place now. So I'm going to look at the original real quick. Okay, so we went pretty far up with them, so we can actually move it up quite a bit. And we'll keep adding them until we get all the way through the eye. So we're going to add another one, move it into place, and we can actually take our direct selection tool, select the right point, and just use the right arrow key on our keyboard and move that over. And we just want to create this nice spacing between everything. That's not looking too bad. It doesn't have to be perfect because we will be rounding these right here and it will look pretty cool no matter what. So now the only thing I want to do is select the top 3, duplicate it again. So we're going to duplicate it, and now we're going to flip it. And you actually want to flip it horizontally, just like that. And you want to drag it back into place so the spacing looks right between here. And then what you could do is you can group them now and just align them to the artboard. So you want to align them vertically, select everything, group them, and then you can duplicate it to the other side. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to transform, reflect, and we're going to reflect it vertically. Now what I want to do is just make sure they're centered horizontally. So if I select both of them, I can do Control G on my keyboard. I didn't mean to select the eye. So I can select both of them, do Control G on my keyboard, and then align them horizontally. And as you guys can see, they're aligned perfectly. So those are set. The next thing we need to do is basically just add our text, and we are looking really good, and we'll also round corners and finish this design off. Congrats if you guys got it this far. This has been an insane tutorial. It's been super long, but I'm glad you guys are with me and you guys are sticking through it because this is some awesome stuff to learn. So the next thing I want to do is type out some text, and I'm using HW Arts, I believe is what it's called. So I'm going to type out Udemy first. And we want to go to our text, double select it. Now I just want to go up to my fonts and hit the TK icon right here to apply typekit filter. And then I want to go down to my font that I downloaded called HWT Arts. And then we're going to be using that one a lot. So what I can do is I can create a duplicate just to keep over there so I have it. And we're going to resize this as well. So it's basically going to go right under here. So you just need to kind of like pay attention to the spacing. It's going to have to be pretty tiny. We have a lot less spacing than we did before for some reason, but that's okay. As you guys can see, it's really condensed and we don't want that. So I'm just going to left click on my font and you're going to see a box appear with a bunch of anchor points. Now you just want to hold an Alt and we're going to change the letter spacing like I showed you guys before. We're going to change it quite a bit too. So we're just going to go all the way up like that with it. And then we can actually center it now. And the problem with doing this letter spacing is it's not going to be actually perfectly centered unless we outline the text. So let me duplicate this real quick and demonstrate that. So if I do Control-Shift-O to outline my text, and then I center it, as you guys can see, it moved over now. And that's just simply because it has an extra gap on the right side for some reason. So that's not a big deal though. So we can drag it into place and we will center that after we're done laying down the top and bottom text. So the bottom says class, so we just need to duplicate it, move it to the bottom. We're doing a lot of duplicating just because we were trying to save some time here. We don't need to re-type out every time. And then you just kind of need to move that in place. And now we can actually do Control-Shift-O and outline that text and then recenter it. And now it's perfectly centered. Before moving on, I actually just want to give you guys a quick little quiz. So I want you guys to tell me how you actually warp this text right here that I have that says T-shirt master. Do we add a text warp to it or do we use the type on a path tool? Pause the video, come up with the answer, and then play and see if you got it right. If you thought use the type on a path tool, you are extremely correct. that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use the type on path tool. We're basically going to draw out an ellipse to create the same kind of arc as the banners that we have. And then we're going to use the type on a path tool to create that work path and then type around it. Really easy stuff. So let's go ahead and drag out an ellipse, and we just want to copy the same arc as our banner here. And it should be pretty easy to do. You just want to kind of mess with it. You can hold in the space bar, keep in mind, to move this shape around as you resize it. So that looks good right there. So we're going to go with that. And then we just want to go to our T tool and then go to type on a path tool. Hover over the blue line until you see a pink path appear, and then left click, and now you have a work path. And we just want to type out t-shirt design, okay? And then we want to resize it. So we're going to select everything, and we're just going to go up way up with the font size. It obviously isn't centered yet, so what we can do is just make sure the paragraph's on center. We can go to our selection tool, and we can move these anchors around like I taught you guys before. So just move them around until it is centered. So we're going to move that one to the right side. We're going to move this one to the left side. Okay, so we don't need to put design. So what we did is we actually just did t-shirt. I don't know why I put design. So we're just doing t-shirt, and we can actually change the letter spacing. So I'm going to hold an Alt, use the right arrow key, and we're going to go to the right with that. I'm going to select off of it. So as you guys can see, it's hugging the bottom really tightly. We don't want that, so we need to change the baseline shift. And you can change the baseline shift right here by setting the point number. And what we can do is just go up with it. So we need to go up about there. That's good. There we go. Cool. That worked. And then the next thing we can do is basically duplicate this and drag it down to create the same width right here that we have on the top. So let me delete that and show you guys exactly what I did. So if you guys actually, if I zoom in on this, you guys will see what I'm saying. If you see this faint blue line, if you pay attention to the spacing in between this blue line and the stroke right here, you basically want to do the same thing for the bottom just so everything matches up. Don't worry too much about it, but just kind of try to get close. So we're just going to duplicate this real quick. So we're duplicating everything together. So now we have the text duplicated. Now I just want to change the text color just to show you guys what I did. So if you guys look at the color now, you guys can see that it's above everything. So there is a copy. And if you hover over the middle line, there's going to be an up arrow that you can see, but it's really small. You want to left click and drag down until it actually hugs the inside of the work path. And once you see that, you are good. Now you just have to change the baseline shift again and go negative with it. So you're going to go really negative with it. Just like that. And just kind of make sure the spacing is even on top and bottom, and you are good. And now you can type out master. And it is way too spaced out, so we're going to change the letter spacing. If I change the letter spacing twice going left, so I'm going to do the same thing for the top, so they're even. And then we can change the font color back to black, just like that. And the baseline shift can be changed just a little bit more as well. It's a little off. It's to be expected. Sometimes you just have to mess with things. So now overall we have the design. It's ready to go. Now we can actually round all the corners. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that next. So we are looking good. Now what I want to do is create another artboard, and we're going to take the entire design, select it, and then group everything together. And we're just going to duplicate it onto this artboard, and then we're going to recenter it real quick using our alignment tools. And then we want to expand everything. So we want to do, first off, select everything, and then do Control-Shift-O. That's going to outline all the text. Now we just need to expand all the strokes and the fills, so just go to Expand, and then make sure Fill and Stroke selected, click OK. Do that twice just in case. So that's good. Now we can actually merge everything together using the Pathfinder, and this is going to take all the separate things and make them all one. What we could do is we can select individual parts of this and round corners, and that's going to take a little bit of time, but what we're going to do is we're going to go around it real quick and do that. So we're going to do these ones first and round them. We're going to go all the way with them, so we're going to go crazy with them. So before I rounded these ones too, but I'm actually going to keep those the same because I like the way they look sharper. So that's just one change I wanted to make. So we're going to do the same for the bottom though. Now what I want to do is go to the eye, and we're going to round all these as well. This is going to be really fun because I love the way this looks. So selecting all the corners real quick. We're going to do the left side first and then go on to the right side. So as you guys can see, it didn't do anything, right? They're still sharp. That's simply because there's an inside fill that we're not seeing. So this is actually white. If we put this on a transparent background, you would see all white. And if I change the color, you'll see what I'm saying. See, that's the fill. We don't want that, so we actually need to hit delete on our keyboard and then do that process all over again. And we can just delete the other side as well. That's just because we didn't get rid of all the fills. We should just get rid of all of them first, but it's totally fine. You can delete them as you go. So now if we redo that, you'll see what it's going to do. It's actually going to work this time. And these ones I don't want to go too far in, so I'm just going to go about there. So that looks pretty good, right? It's kind of cool looking, right? And you can do the same thing for all the other corners if you want. I'm not going to go crazy on this one, but you guys can literally go round happy. You can round everything that your heart desires, but that is how you guys can create the Udemy t-shirt masterclass eye design. Really crazy design, right? But we did it using just basic shapes that is already in Illustrator, and we used all the tools we previously learned to accomplish this. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys got lost, watch it over again. Don't worry, I'm here to help you. There's a Q&A section. If you guys have a question, ask me, and I'm here for you. Practice makes perfect, guys. That's all I gotta say. So keep practicing. You guys are gonna kill it. I know it. So I will see you guys in the next project. Welcome to our first project. I'm so proud of you guys for making it this far. And this is going to be the really exciting part because we're going to use all the skills we just learned, and we're going to learn some extra skills along the way to create this really nice vintage motorcycle design. I love these designs. They're one of my favorite type of designs to do. Anything vintage, I'm a big fan of. So this is going to be really fun for me to teach you guys, and we are going to be using a graphic that I actually included in this course, so you guys are going to be able to download this bike graphic. It's from freepik.com, and the beauty of design is you don't always have to draw anything up. You can actually find vectors that are for personal use and commercial use as well, so you can save a lot of time just by finding graphics that are really cool online and using them in your designs, and there's no shame in that. Sometimes I do draw things up depending on what it is, but for a motorcycle, I'm not the best at drawing motorcycles, so I went and found a graphic for you guys. And I know some of you don't draw and you still want to create cool things, so don't let not being able to draw discourage you from creating cool stuff, because you can definitely still do it, like I said, just by using resources online. You have to become a resource wizard in a way when you're a designer. So anyway, we're going to be using a motorcycle graphic today to create this really awesome design, and we're also going to be using some fonts that are included in the type kit that you pay for monthly. It's included with your Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. And as a bonus, at the end of this course, I'm going to show you guys how to color this design and also texture it, which is going to be really, really fun. So anyway, we're going to get started now. If you pull up the motorcycle graphic that I included, we're going to be using the bottom one here. And this one is just the one I chose. You can use the top one as well. It's really up to you, but I thought the bottom one looked kind of cool, so we're going to be using that one today. And we're just basically going to drag it onto a new artboard of 600 pixels by 600 pixels. And if you guys remember at the beginning, you just go up to File, New, and you can actually pull up a new document. And I showed you guys how to set that up. So pull up a new document, 600 pixels by 600 pixels. The first thing we want to do is we want to think about the general idea that we're going for here, because obviously you don't want to just rush into a design without planning it a little bit. But I knew for this one I wanted to do an arcing text on the top, so I wanted to have like a nice type path around a oval, and then on the bottom I just wanted to have straight text and then my name at the bottom around some sort of object. That's all stuff that I think about prior to this design. And then anything like this that's adding variation, like 1991 I added as a stroke instead of just a solid fill. So just stuff like that really makes a design stand out. So we're going to focus on that today. So we have our bike here. We just want to resize this. So once you select any object at all, it's going to put this blue frame around it, and that's basically it will allow you to either move it around or you can resize it. So if I take a corner and I hold in shift, I can resize things to any size I want. And since this is a vector program, we're not going to lose quality. That's the beauty of this. So yeah, you can resize it if you want. So we're actually going to resize it to about this size for now, and we will make some tweaks to it. We're going to get as close as we can to the other design that we see on the left here. But basically the main part is the text, right? That's the thing that stands out the most. We're using two different fonts here. So we have the first font that's called HWT Arts. Again, you can go up to your type kit and you can add that for free. And then we have our KineScope font, which is our cursive font. And you can actually add the font by clicking Add Fonts, and it will pull up a browser like this. Let me show you. And you can actually find the font just by typing in the name. So I'll demonstrate that right now, just so you guys can get the general idea of how to find it. So we type in HWT Arts, it should pop up, and there it is. And then from there, you can actually sync the font. So make sure your font is synced. And then the other one, like I said, is called KineScope or KineScope. I don't even know, really. Let me see if you guys can tell me what it actually says. I think it's KineScope, but I might be completely wrong. Who cares, right? So once you guys add those fonts, we are ready to begin. So the first thing I want to do is obviously I want to add the actual text on top. So I want to add t-shirt design on top. And to do that, what I need to do is draw out an ellipse. If I wanted to, I could just hit L on my keyboard, but I'm just going to manually go to it. So we're going to draw out a black oval, and you don't want to hold in shift, because when you hold in shift, it's going to make it perfect. It's going to make a perfect circle, and we don't want that. We actually want it to be, we want to be able to control the shape of it. So just drag out normally without holding in shift, and you can accomplish that. And we kind of want it to hug the bike a little bit. So About right there is fine. And this might, I might have different dimensions on this design because it's going to be hard to copy this one, but you guys will get the general idea anyway. So anyway, now we have that black circle, and if we actually change the color and lower the opacity, you're going to see what it's doing here. So, and now what we can do is we can go to our T tool and go to type on a path. And if you guys remember, if you hover over the blue line once it appears, you can left click, and then that will create a work path, and you guys can actually type around that path. So really, really cool. Now what we want to do is type out our text that we're going to be using. So you guys can do whatever you want, but I'm going to make this all caps. So it's really important for caps. So t-shirt design. So we just want to type out t-shirt design, and it's not in the right positioning right now, but that is fine. What I want to do first is I want to resize it. I want to make sure it's the right size. So we're just going to go up on the font size right here. And then what I want to do is go to that HWT font. I can actually choose my type kit fonts, and then I can go down and find it, and it's right there. So that's perfect. I want to actually make sure paragraph centered. Once you actually center that, you're going to see it go to the bottom right most likely. And once you see that, you can actually use these little lines like I showed you. They're basically anchor points, and you can move those around the work path that you created in order to center it easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this one right here, and I'm going to make sure it's centered. So I took the one on the left right here, and I centered it to the right here, and I'm going to take this left one now and center it to the left. So now you're going to see those smart guides kind of kick in. It's going to let us know that it's centered, and that is centered. So you just get it as close as you can, and then you can even take this middle one and also center it. So that's saying it's centered. So now it is completely centered, even though it might not seem like it with these lines. But you basically just want to make sure you're following your smart guides, because those are not going to lie to you. So now the smart guides are telling me that it's centered because you've seen that like pink line going down the center, and it's letting us know that that is centered now. So anyway, now we have our text, and it's not quite big enough. So what I want to do is I just want to raise the font size a little bit more. We'll go to like 78 for now. That looks about right. So anyway, we can keep that for now. And before we move on to anything else, what we want to do is just lay down the rest of the text. So we have this bottom masterclass text, and we want to lay that one down now. So I'm just going to type that out real quick. And it's important to keep the font sizes pretty similar. It's okay to have some variation. So for instance, on this bottom original Udemy course, I have a different font size going, but it's okay to have that kind of variation. Just don't do it too much. So now I have my lorem ipsum because I used my T tool to type out some text. We want to type out masterclass, and we can add a space to this, but I'm actually not going to. I'm just going to keep it as one word. Now masterclass is in place. We just basically we used the T tool, we typed out masterclass, we made sure the font was HWT Arts, and we have a 78-point font, and then we just moved it into place and then used the alignment tools to center it perfectly. So now that's in place, and we can actually move it down. It's a little too far up. Now we need to type out our other text. So since we're already on the same font, we can type out Udemy course. So let's type out Udemy course real quick, just get that out of the way. And we actually made that a lot smaller, so we can actually hold down shift and drag it down, and just make sure you're kind of keeping track of what the font size is. I like to make it even, so we're going to go with the 22-point font for these smaller fonts. And then we're going to hold an Alt and just hit the right arrow key on our keyboard, and we're going to change the spacing. And that looks good. That's a little too much, so we can go back. Again, holding an Alt, we're doing that. And we can do it manually, keep in mind. We can go to character and do that manually, just like we learned before. So we can change the VA spacing right here, or I think they call it the tracking. Yeah, so set the tracking is what it says. I call it letter spacing. You can call it whatever you want. But anyway, now we're going to move that into place, just like that. As you can see, it's sitting right above. It's probably a little bit larger, actually, so I'm just going to change the font size to 24 instead, and that's actually looking better. So I'm going to move it down now, just like that. And now we need to type out original in the second font. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. To save some time, we're actually going to duplicate Udemy course and change it to by Charley Pangus for the bottom one. So since we're already on the same font, it's easier just to utilize that. And then we can do the other font last, since everything else is the same font. So we're going to duplicate this by holding an Alt, and we're going to drag down and then let go of our mouse, click, and then that's going to duplicate it. And now we can type out by Charley Pangus. Just like that. So I just typed out Charley Pangus, and now I want to change the letter spacing. So we're just going to hold an Alt and hit the right arrow key. And I used a much smaller font for this one. So I'm using a 24 for this one, and I think I can use about a 20 for this one. We can actually go even smaller than that. We're going to go to a 18. No, we'll go 20 for this one. So we're going 4 points smaller, and we're not going to add the shape yet because we're going to do that last. I did notice on the top text I actually spaced it out more, so we're just going to select that and hold an Alt and use the right arrow key again to space it out more. So as you can see, we're just creating that space that we had last time, and we can actually move everything up. I notice I have too much space going on, so we can move everything up. I don't want to select the top one, so we're just going to move all this other text up real quick, just like that. And we need to save some space for original, so we do need to have that. We do need to have plenty of space for that. So I'm just going to move everything. Now we can actually type out 1991, and we'll create that stroke real quick. We'll make the fill white, and then we'll move on to adding the original, and then we'll add the shape at the bottom. So now I want to type out 19, and I want to space once. So 19, just like that. So all I did is use the enter key, and then I just basically put 9 on a separate text line. And then now what we could do is we can actually change the spacing of this, because right now it's really far apart. I don't want it so far apart, even though we have it on the original. I basically want these two black boxes to touch, and then once they touch, I am good with that. And it's already centered, so we are looking good. And also make sure there's no space between 1 and 9. So I'm going to go back real quick, check the spacing, and there's no space, so we are good there. Now I can hit enter again. Now we have 19, and before we actually do any resizing, I'm actually going to change the fill to white. So we're going to go up, change the fill to white, and actually what we could have did is we could have just used these double-sided arrows, pressed it once, and it will automatically add that stroke. And then we can change the stroke size to like 3 for now, and then we need to, actually we'll make it 4, and then we'll duplicate this, again holding an Alt, dragging to the right, and letting go of our mouse click. And now we can type out 91, so space 91. So now we have that done. So now we can change the font size, and let me see what I use for Udemy real quick. We'll try that out first. So I'll go to 24 points, and I can change it up here. It might be too small. Yes, it's way too small. So we're going to have another variation, even though I just told you guys not to have too much, but sometimes it's okay depending on the design. So now we're going to drag those into place, and they're a little too big, so what I want to do is make them a little smaller. So I'm going to select them both together, holding in shift, and then just resizing them. And those are a little too small, so we're just going to redo that again. And basically we're just experimenting until we're happy with it, and that's looking good. So now we can drag those into place where they need to be, and it actually needs to be opposite. So dragging that one on the left and dragging the 91 on the right, and then we can select them both holding in shift, and we can actually go to our alignment tools like I taught you guys in the previous tutorials, and we can go to align to selection and just make sure those are centered together. It's a really, really cool trick to do that, and they are centered. So now we can do Control G to group them, and then we can go back to our alignment and do align to artboard and just make sure those are centered, and they are. So we can move those up just a little bit. So basically you just want to drag those into place. One thing I like to do before I move on is I'm actually going to move those out of the way. I'm going to select the entire design real quick, group it, and then I'm going to center it one more time, and then I can ungroup it. And that's just to make sure everything's staying centered and nice and neat. And then we can recenter these horizontally and vertically. And I like that. That's looking good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to type out original now. So what we can do is we can actually select a Udemy course, hold and Alt, drag it up. So I duplicated it. Now all I have to do is actually type in the next font, which is Kindscope or Kinscope, whatever it is. And we also need to change this to original. So do capital O, and then everything else can be lowercase, and then we need to change the letter spacing, just like that. So since original is a completely different font and it's looking really small, we could resize it, and I'm going to because it's just a little too small for my liking. So we are going to have several variations in font sizes, but it's okay for this design. So now we have original, Udemy course, masterclass. Everything's looking really good. That's exactly what we wanted. We could probably move masterclass up a little bit, and we can also change the spacing just a little bit as well. It's a little too close together, so we change the spacing just to give it some breathing room. So all of our text is placed down, and now we are ready to add the final touches, which are these lines and the rectangle that's rounded behind my name. So now what we can do is add the rectangle first, and what I'm going to do is go to my rectangle real quick, or I can hit M on my keyboard, and I'm going to drag that out, and I just want to basically kind of fit it around my name without it being too big and too small, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to nicely fit it around my name, and once you do that, it's going to turn black because I have my background color, my foreground color set to black, but it's okay for now. What we want to do before we even move on is we actually want to make sure everything's selected, which it is, and we want to make sure there's a white dot on each corner, and then we can drag one of those in, and it's going to round the corners. Look how easy that is. It's freaking awesome, right? So now that those are rounded, what we can do is we can hold in Control Shift and send it to the back, or you can right click and do arrange and actually send to back. I know some of you guys are on Macs and iMacs and all that, so the shortcuts are going to be a little different for you. But so now we have the font in front. I know you can't see it, but once we change the font color to white, you're going to see it automatically, and then we can actually resize it. Now, at this point, you can outline your text because everything is looking good, so you really don't need it to be a live object, but it's always good to have one duplicate copy of the entire design that's live and one that's all outlined, just so you have a backup. So I have another design that's a backup, so I can actually select my entire design, and I can do Control-Shift-O, and that's going to outline all the text like I taught you guys before. And now it's actually ready to print, and we can also outline the strokes if we wanted to by doing Object Expand, and that's going to expand the fill and the strokes, and you can actually deselect whatever you want. So if you don't want to expand the strokes, you can deselect that, but I always expand the fill and the stroke, so I'm going to click OK on that. So now everything's basically expanded, it's ready for print. So now when we go to print that, all that text is outlined, so it's ready to go. And now I just want to kind of fine tune things before I add the final touches, which are these lines. I just want to move master class and my name down a little bit, just to give it a little bit more breathing room. I'm going to move my name down as well. And it's also not centered completely, so we can fix that just by using the align options here, and I'm aligning it to my artboard for that. And that is all looking good. I'm happy with that. The next thing we need to do is just add those lines, and we are basically done. And this is a new tool I didn't go over yet, but like I told you guys in the beginning, I was going to show you guys some extra things that I didn't teach you yet. So the line tool is really cool because you can literally just hold down shift and drag out a line, and you can change the stroke on it. And as you guys can see, it creates this really nice line that's a stroke. And we can change the roundness of it just by going to the stroke menu. And all you have to do is actually go to caps and select round cap, and it's going to round it. And that's the look we're going for, so we can actually keep that now. And this is a little too thick, so I'm going to go down to, like, let's say 6 maybe. I think 6 looks good. Now what I want to do is just drag that into place, and I will resize it. So I'm going to take my direct selection tool here, and I'm actually going to select the right corner and just go use my left arrow key to move it back to the left a little bit. So we're shortening it is what we're doing. And once you do that, you can actually kind of play with it a little bit too and figure out what looks good. You don't want it too long, you don't want it too short, obviously, so we're going to let it expand a little bit more. So now what I want to do is I want to duplicate it once, just so I can save it for up here, and then we're going to duplicate it one more time and move it to the left side, so we have another one over there. Now we're going to group those, so I have both of them selected. So if you don't know how to select something and you're a little lost, all you have to do is select one item, hold in shift, and select whatever item you want to select, and it will actually select both of them. And then after you do that, you can do Control-G on your keyboard, and that will group them, or you can right-click and group them too. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to use shortcuts. And now we're going to recenter it, and it is centered already, so that's one step done that we don't have to worry about. And they are a little too long, I think. Actually, yeah, I don't like how long they are, so I'm just going to go back, and it's really easy, so I'm just going to delete that one and move this one in a little bit more, because it was a little too long for my liking. And then I'm actually going to move it over to the right. Do the same thing, duplicate it, move it to the other side, select both of them holding in shift, and then we can right click and group, or we could do Control-G, recenter them, and they are centered. So now what we want to do is we want to add these speed marks, so it looks like the bike's moving a little bit, which is kind of a cool little effect. And all we do is we take that duplicate that we made, and we just dragged it into place, and now we can take the direct selection tool, select any point, and move it in, and change the width of it, just like that. You don't want to go down with it though, because then it will be uneven. So you just want to actually go left and right with it, not up and down. So now we're just going to kind of copy the same look we had. So we can move this one down a little bit, and we can duplicate it again, holding an Alt, dragging. And then we can move this one to the right a little bit more. And then finally, we're going to have this one really tiny on top. So we don't want it to be too long at all. So we're just going to take it way down. And I actually made 2 copies on accident. So now we're going to move it to the left. So we're changing the size drastically. It's going to be really small. And then we just kind of want to make sure this looks nice and even, and it does. So you kind of have to eye it a little bit on that. And you can also use your alignment tools for that. So you can actually select them all, and you can do align to selection, and you can change the spacing using the vertical distribute center, and that will do that. Now, what I noticed is I don't like how it's kind of hugging up here too much. So what I want to do is move it down just a little bit, just like that. And we're going to just kind of reposition them just a little. We're not too much. We're not going to go crazy on it, but that's looking good. So we're going to keep that for now. And then the next thing we have is we have one over here on the right side. So we're just going to select the smallest one, and we're actually going to duplicate it and put it over here. And we're just going to let those smart guides tell us where it lines up, and it lines up right there. So that's good. And now we just need to add 2 to the top. So we can take the middle one here, duplicate it, put it down, and then we can duplicate it again, just like that, and then change the size of it now. And we're gonna look at it, kind of eye it, and this one can actually go up a little bit, just give it a little bit more breathing room. You can change the size of it as well. And now we can move the bottom one up a little bit too. So we're fine tuning this is what we're doing. We're not trying too hard. We're just trying to look at it and see what we can do to improve it. As far as like positioning goes, sizing goes, and everything like that. It's also important to note that you just want to kind of keep track of your spacing and everything, make sure everything looks like it's spaced out correctly. Like original's kind of hugging you to me a little close, but so I can move it up a little bit, but it's stuff that's not really necessary, but it does help the design look better in the long run. So after you're done with the design, it's a good idea to actually walk away from it for a little bit and then actually go back to it later on and then decide if anything needs to be changed. And if anything doesn't bug you, then you can keep it the same. But right now, right away, this little line up here is bugging me because it's a different distance away from the bike than this one is. So I'm just going to move it in just a little bit. I just want to make sure each line is the same distance away from the bike. That way it doesn't look all awkward. So basically if this one was all the way in and this one has a space, it looks weird, you know what I mean? So that's how I made this vintage motorcycle design using all the things I just taught you guys. And in the next video, we have another really cool design we're going to be making, and we're going to go over even more tools. This one's pretty simple actually, but the next one's going to be a lot more intricate, and it's going to be very interesting to explain to you guys, but you guys are going to have a blast designing it, I promise. So I will see you guys in the next project, and good luck on this project, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. In this project, we're going to be focusing on just using type to create this really interesting design. We will be using the pen tool to create this cool thunderbolt that you see as part of the queue, and also at the bottom here. So we're going to type out quality right now. We're going to be using the same font we used before, which is I think a font called Kinscope. I don't know the name. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think that's what it's called. So we're going to go with that. But anyway, now what we want to do is just type out quality. We want to do a capital Q and then the rest lowercase. So it might be hard to actually see that right now, but once I change the font, you'll see that it is lowercase. So now I just want to go to the font. It's right here, Kinscope, and you can see it. It says quality right here, and it is lowercase on the rest of it. I wanted the Q capital, and I wanted everything else lowercase, and it is. So that is beautiful. We want to add that slant now, so all we have to do is right click on this. Once we're selecting the text, right click, go to transform, and you actually want to go to shear. And what shear is going to do is it's actually going to allow you to add a vertical or horizontal shear to it, and it basically just adds like a slant. If you go to horizontal, it's not going to rise up on the right hand side like we want it, so make sure it's on vertical, and you want to go to about 351 degrees, and then once you see that, you can click OK. We're not quite done yet. What I need to do is outline the text first, and then I need to do some resizing. So first I'm going to do Control-Shift-O. That's going to outline the text, and then we can actually merge it all together just like that. And what I want to do is ungroup everything because I just want to select this part right here with the dot, so we need to include that, and I'm actually going to group that part. So now I can move it around the artboard and it's not going to be separated. And then we just want to resize it. So we're going to make it quite a bit smaller, and it's going to look something like this. You can actually make it a little bit bigger than that. And I want to also make sure it's kind of centered, and it is, so we're looking good there. I'm going to actually get rid of this little part here because I'm going to be adding a thunderbolt instead. In order to do that, all I have to do is select the Q and then go to N on my keyboard, or I could just manually go to the pencil tool right here. And what the pencil tool is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to smooth these edges and get rid of this part. So I'll show you how it works. So you just basically left click, drag where you want, and it will get rid of it just like that. And we can do the same thing for the bottom part. Really, there's nothing to this tool. It's really easy to use, and once you master it, it's just so powerful. Okay, so we're going to keep doing that until we're happy. That looks pretty good. The bottom can be a little bit smoother. It's a little it looks like somebody dented it or something. So there you go. As you guys can see, it's super smooth now. That's exactly what I wanted, so we're going to go with that. And then what we could do now is just kind of move this one in a little bit more, and then we can merge it all together using Pathfinder. So now we have quality. It's all ready to go. Now we can add our Thunderbolt here. The Thunderbolt's really easy to add. All you have to do is use your pen tool. So I'm using my pen tool with a fill right now, but I actually just want to switch it to stroke for now, and that's going to allow me to see the shape of the Thunderbolt better. And you just kind of want to make some points to create a Thunderbolt. There's really nothing to this. It's a lot of experimenting. You're going to get one that looks good and you're going to get one that looks bad, so just keep doing it until you're happy. And as you guys can see, the pen tool is super powerful for doing things like this. And then once you actually close that out, you can actually select any part of it and resize it and do all the other stuff with it. So if it's not looking right, don't worry. You can just select each point with the direct selection tool and just kind of mess with it a little bit more until you're more happy with it. Right now it's looking a little better, but I'm still not liking it, so I'm just going to keep going around and messing with the points until I'm more content with this. And so that looks good. So we're going to keep that, and we're just going to put this off to the side. So I'm duplicating it, putting it off to the side so I have it. And I do that quite often. I just hide things off the artboard in case I need it later. And now we're just gonna fill it. So we're just gonna actually change the stroke and fill. And now it's a solid black color. And what we could do next is we could just add a stroke to it, about 2. It doesn't need to be too big. And then I wanna round the corners so they're not so sharp. And that's basically all we have to do for that. So the next thing I wanna do is add an arc, but before I do that, I just wanna flip it. And so all I have to do to flip it is go to transform, reflect, and I wanna actually reflect it horizontally. So now we are ready to add that arc. So I just go up to effect, go to warp, and then go to arc. And we don't want to add too big of an arc. We just want a very, very tiny arc. So about there is fine. So click off of it once you're done, just to make sure you're happy. And once you're happy with it, select it and go to object and expand appearance. And that's going to get rid of the warp box basically. And it's going to be easier to manage. Now we can actually resize it and stuff like that and put it in place where it needs to be. So I had it right here. And we might change the stroke size as well. So let's mess with that real quick. Make it a little bigger. We can even resize it just a little bit. It's okay if you warp things a little bit, especially because this is a vector program, so it's not going to hurt. I actually like this one better than the last one, and that happens sometimes. So definitely keep making different Thunderbolt shapes until you're happy with it. I actually like the way this one looks. It could definitely be just a little bit wider. So I just changed the width of it. But again, it's just kind of experimentation. You just need to mess with it until you're happy, and then once you're happy with it, you can go with it. So it looks good now. Now what we need to do is just type out 91, and we're going to add that as a stroke instead. So we're just going to type out 91 real quick. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. We don't have to change any letter spacing or anything like that. So we're going to resize it and kind of put it in place where it needs to be. And I think right there is fine. And then we're going to change the fill to a stroke. So we're just going to switch that real quick. And we're also going to change the stroke size. It's about 3 or 2, I think. 3 is fine, so we're going to keep that. And then what we can do is we can group everything together now and center it completely. So now we can start working around the design and adding all the other elements. So we're going to do that. And if you guys remembered, we used a circle to type on a path to create that nice arc. So we're going to do the same exact thing. So now that I have that circle, I just want to make sure it's centered, obviously. And then we can go to type on a path tool, and it's going to get rid of all the characteristics of this circle, because right now it has a transparent fill. Basically no fill at all, obviously. And then it has a stroke. So once we add that path to it, it's going to get rid of it. And as you guys can see, I got rid of it. I'm just going to put everything back at default. So what I like to do before I continue on is change the font real quick. So we're going to go to the font we've been using, which is HWT Arts. And I definitely encourage you guys to use any font you want. Experiment with it. And we're just going to change the font size now. So it's hugging the bottom. I don't want that. So I just went to my selection tool. I selected the text itself. And I'm actually going to take these little anchor points and I'm going to move them around until I'm happy and it's centered on top. So I'm going to move this one to the left and it's going to disappear, but it's okay. We're going to take this one and move it to the right now. So now it's centered and I'm happy with that. And now I just want to actually see what I titled the text. So I did T-shirt design masterclass. So we're going to type that out real quick. T-shirt design masterclass. T-shirt design masterclass. Let's get rid of that extra S. And then I'm going to resize it real quick. Not too big. We can actually change the letter spacing, I think I did. Yeah, so we're going to make it larger real quick. And then we're also going to change the spacing. What's going to happen is it is going to disappear, but what we need to do is just take those anchor points and bring them to the bottom and make sure they're even on each side. So that one's right there. And we're going to take this one and bring it right to the right side of that one. And now we can actually change the letter spacing. So we're just going to keep resizing it until we're happy. Basically, we want it to go about right here on each side. The only other thing I need to do is I need to separate master from class. And I can change the font size if I want to mess with it even more, but I'm just going to leave it alone for now until we put the bottom text on. So I'm going to copy it and I'm just going to paste it in place and we're going to reuse it. So now that it's pasted in place, I can take this little line and I can drag it down until it hugs the center of this circle or in the inside of this circle. And then we want to go to character and change the baseline shift again. So we're using the same tools we've already used and that was too much. And then once we change the baseline shift, we can select the text. And I'm going to put on Udemy because that's what I put for the bottom. So now on Udemy's there, and I do think I made the font size a lot bigger. So we're going to go up on font sizes. We're going to do 50 for now, and let's try 50 for the bottom one. We might have to change some spacing. No, you know what? That's actually looking good. We're going to keep that. Now everything's looking pretty good. On Udemy's there, T-shirt design masterclass looks good. Just double checking things. The next thing we could do is we could just put down these little dots because why not? It's pretty easy. So we're just going to drag out an ellipse and we want to make sure it has a fill instead. And we just kind of eye it and make sure it's in place, and it is. One method I use sometimes is I'll create another circle and add a thin stroke and line it up in the center of this text just to see where the circle needs to sit, but you can get pretty close by just eyeing it on this kind of stuff. So we're going to drag that into place. We're going to group them all together, center them, and the one thing I noticed is on Udemy is not completely centered, I don't believe. I'm just going to double check that. Actually it is. So now what I could do is just move these circles down and actually move this one in, because right now I think it was a little too far out, and recenter it. Those dots are looking good now. It's definitely important to take a minute and just stare at it and make sure it's in the right position and stuff like that, but those look good to me. The next thing I want to do is create the inside text, and all I have to do to accomplish that is copy the outside text and paste it, and then we're going to resize it to bring it in about right there, and we're actually going to take the font size way down now. The next thing I want to do is just change the letter spacing real quick, so I'm going to hold an Alt and hit the right arrow key, and we're going to go quite a bit with that. I'm going to bring it in a little bit because it was a little too spaced out, so I didn't really like that. So now that looks pretty good. I think quality and 91 can be a little bigger, so we're going to up the size on that real quick. You can also change the spacing on this because it's way too close to the Q there. So what I'm going to do is resize that circle that the path is on, and I could just bring that up pretty easily like that. So now crafting's in place, and now we need to put merchandise cents right at the bottom. Now I just want to copy this one again. So we're doing the same exact thing, and we're going to paste that in front, and we're going to take this top line, and we're going to left click and drag in until it hits the bottom. And once it hits the bottom, you can let go and just basically reposition it. And then we need to change the baseline shift, because obviously right now it's it hugging the inside and this one's hugging the outside. So we don't want that. Just like this, and that's looking good. Let me see here. So merchandise cents. So we're actually typing out merchandise cents, just like that. That's looking pretty good. All this text can be outlined, so I'm just going to re-outline it real quick, and then we can recenter that and see where it's all sitting. And this can actually be resized, so we need to select both of these and resize them real quick. I realize there's a little too much space, so that we could do that. And I'm actually going to change the font size as well, so we're going to go up to like 15 with it and change the letter spacing again, just because I want it to fill up more room. So what font size did I just use? So I used a 15 font size. We're going to do the same for the top, just like that. So now as you can see, it fills up a lot more space, and we can even manually adjust the spacing in the center. It doesn't have to be completely centered to the artboard. And the only other thing I did was I took that Thunderbolt that I made, that I took a copy of. So I took that, I made it black, so we changed the fill to black, and I just slapped it on the bottom, and I don't know why I did that, but I thought it kind of looked cool. So we slapped it at the bottom. I guess it kind of added some sort of like element to it. So that's basically how I did that design. So those are the 3 projects, and if you guys got this far, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. This stuff definitely is not easy. It takes a lot of time, and you really have to practice to get good at it. But with practice, you will learn. I promise you. Just follow the steps I just showed you guys in these 3 projects. Just use the skills I taught you guys, and I promise you, you can create some really cool stuff with practice. So anyway, in the next section, we're going to go over coloring our designs, and then as a bonus at the end of this course, I'm actually going to show you guys how to add some really cool texture to these designs to make them really pop out and make them look really vintage. So I'll see you guys in the next section. In the last video, we used the pen tool to create rectangles and triangles, and we also worked with some strokes, some fill colors, and all that good stuff. And in this video, we're going to be using the Pathfinder tool to create interesting shapes. We're going to be focusing on creating an eye out of circles today, and it's going to be really interesting to show you guys how that works. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of all this stuff real quick. We don't need it right now. And what we want to do is just draw ellipses, because we're going to use those to create an eye. So you just want to draw out 2 of them real quick. And we can get rid of the stroke. We don't need that right now. We can keep the same color, and then we're going to create another one as well. And basically, we're going to use these, like I said, to create an eye. So if you guys actually select both of them, you can see that an eye shape already shows in the center here, right? And what we could do is we can use a Pathfinder tool to cut this in specific ways in order to show shapes that we didn't see before. So basically, you can do, like, let's say if something's in front here, like for instance, if we have a red circle in front of the other orange circle, we can use minus front, and you guys will see that it's right here on the very top when you go to your Pathfinder. And if you guys remembered, it's right on this bar right here. So if yours is like this, you just select these little squares that are on top of each other, and that will go to your Pathfinder, and also a line is going to be on the same one. So what you want to do is you want to go to your Pathfinder, and you can actually do minus front. What minus front is doing is literally minusing the object in front from the back object. So it's really, really simple. You just hover over them and you can see what they all do. So the question is, how do we create an eye out of these two circles? So what you want to do is you want to go to your selection tool or your direct selection tool. It really doesn't matter. You want to select all of the shapes that you have on your artboard. Again, you can use direct selection tool or just selection tool to accomplish that, but basically you need to select both of them, and you're going to see this faint blue line, and you can see the eye in the center already formed here, right? And all we did is put two circles on top of each other, and that's it. Now all you have to do is go to your Pathfinder, and there's actually a few ways we could do that. We can either divide this, which will literally divide the shapes into different parts, and I'll show you what I mean by that just real quick. So we can delete this now since we hit divide, and we can hit this and delete that as well. So basically what that's doing is it's just dividing whatever you selected into different parts. So we have one part here, one right here in the center, which is the eye that we want, and then the bottom part. So there's three there. So that's how divide works, and you can definitely use that. That is fine, but it's not the easiest way to do it. I will show you guys right now what the easiest way is. So what we want to do is we actually want to go up to shape modes and use intersect, and that will actually get rid of the top and bottom shapes in order to keep the center eye. So what I did is I went back before I cut anything with the divide, and now we're actually just going to click intersect, and you guys can see that it's going to leave the eye now. So that's literally all it does. It takes the intersecting parts and it gets rid of everything else. So now we are left with an eye. So that's how you use the Pathfinder, and you can really do whatever you want with them. But the two main ones that I use all the time is divide, intersect, and I also do unite. And basically what unite does is it will unite two shapes together, and I'll show you guys what I mean by that right now. So I'm going to drag another shape out real quick, and we're going to make this one red just so you guys can see what it looks like. And what we could do is we can actually merge both those shapes together by using unite. So it's going to create one solid shape with the shapes that you overlapped or that you combined together. So we put a circle, a red circle on top of the eye, and we hit unite, and it's going to combine them onto one shape. So it's going to create one shape out of those two shapes that you originally had. In the last section, we went over using the Pathfinder tool. In this section, we're going to be using the Shape Builder tool, which is one of my favorite tools to use, and a lot of great logo designers use this tool. It's really hard to explain the Shape Builder tool because it's easier just to show you guys. So I'm actually going to demonstrate how to make an eye with the Shape Builder tool. So we're going to do the same thing as we did last time with the Pathfinder. We're going to draw out two circles here, and they can be the same color or different colors. Now, for the sake of the tutorial, and I want to make it easy for you guys to see, I'm going to make one a different color. So now we have two circles, right? And I want to center those real quick. You don't have to. But now we have two circles. And what we want to do is we want to actually use the Shape Builder tool to delete the top and bottom part in order to keep the center eye part that's overlapping. And if you don't see the overlap, you just select everything real quick. And you can see this faint blue line appear, and that's how you know that you have everything selected. And then you can see different shapes appear, right? So now we see this eye-looking shape in the center appear, just like we did last time when we used the Pathfinder. So now when we select our Shape Builder tool, we're going to be able to hover over different parts of this shape that we have selected as a whole, and we can either delete things or we can fill it with different colors, or we can select multiple things at once. So first off, we're going to actually delete things. So if we hold an Alt on our keyboard, you'll see the plus go to minus, and you can left click and you can delete any part, which is going to leave us with that eye. So as you can see, it's really easy to use, and this tool is very addicting to use because it's just so fun. So now if we go back, what we can do is we can actually change the color from red to, let's say, yellow, and we can actually fill these shapes with different colors as well. Or we could just do the center. It's really up to you, but you get the point, right? So we can delete things, we can fill things with color. Now let's say we want to delete the top and bottom at the same time. All we have to do is hold an Alt again on our keyboard, and we left click and drag, and you'll see this faint black line appear, and you can drag over any shape you want to delete and it will delete it at the same time. You could do that for color as well. So if you want to fill both with let's say this yellow color, you just drag and don't let go of that left click yet, and you can fill both of those with the yellow color as well. So that's how you use the shape builder tool to create an eye. Really easy, guys, right? It doesn't take much effort to create really cool shapes using it. We will be using it more. We have a project coming up that we will be using this on, so you guys are going to see it in action. Next video, I'm going to show you guys how to use the reflect tool, which allows you to reflect things, literally. You can take a half of a triangle and reflect it and create a full triangle, and that's going to be really fun. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Welcome back, guys. In this section, we're going to be creating custom type. This is really exciting because a lot of designs require text or have text in them. Not all designs need text, but it definitely adds to a design. So we're going to be typing around a circle. We're going to be going over warping text, outlining text, and also downloading custom fonts to use in our design. So really cool section, guys. So in this first video, I'm just going to go over the type tool, where it's located and how to use it, a brief overview basically, and it's going to be a really short video. So to go to your text tool, all you have to do is hit T on your keyboard and it will go to it, and that's super easy to remember because guess what? Text starts with the T, so just hit T on your keyboard, it goes right to it, or you can just go under your pen tool and that will go to it as well. We have a few of them that we're going to be using in this section. We're going to be using the type tool right now, and we're also going to be going over type on a path tool. Those are the two I use most often. So the way this works is you can literally create text using this type tool. So if you left click once, it will put some lorem ipsum up automatically, and we can change it just by simply typing on our keyboard like we would in Word. And it works very closely to Word. So if I type in Udemy, you guys will see that it typed out a word. Now the cool thing is if I go to the selection tool now, I can actually hold and shift to proportionally resize this. So we can actually resize the text that way, or we can select everything and we can actually change the point size right here. And you can see that you're right next to your character, you have your font that you're using, we have the font weight, and we also have the font size. So everything's literally right in front of your face, really easy. That's basically the quick rundown, but sometimes we want to do more customization than what we just did. We just typed out Udemy, which is really easy, and if you, like I said, if you've used Word before, or a notepad on your PC, or any other note software that you have on your Mac or whatever, you are very familiar with how this works. Now, what if we want to create a multi-line text and we also want to change the line height and line spacing and letter spacing and all that other cool stuff? We could do that within the character palette right here. So let me actually create another line of text real quick. So selecting the same line of text, I'm just going to hit enter, and we're going to type out course, all caps, so I'm holding in shift. So now we have Udemy course. Now let's say we want to change the letter spacing, right? And there's a really cool shortcut, but before I show you the shortcut, I'll show you the manual way to do it because not everybody uses shortcuts, which I do recommend you try to learn all the shortcuts if possible because it does make your workflow a lot easier. But now we have our text. Let me go ahead and center it a little bit more. And if we go up to our character palette, we can do a bunch of different things with this character palette. We can alter the font size, we can change the line height. So just by doing this, we can change the line height over here. We can change the letter spacing. We can also change the baseline shift, which is right here, which comes in handy when we're typing around a circle and stuff and we need to change the shift on that circle, basically give it more breathing room and stuff like that, which will make more sense later on. But yeah, so you can use the character palette in a lot of different ways. I don't really mess with too many of these settings because you can literally do everything through a shortcut, and I'm going to show you guys that right now. So if I click off here onto my text, we can hit the left or right arrow key holding an alt, and we can change the letter spacing that way instead of going into that character palette. So it makes things really easy. So not only can you change the letter spacing going left and right on your arrow keys, you can also change the line height by going up and down on your arrow keys as well, holding an alt. So if we go up, it will put them back to normal more. You can even go extreme and overlap them, which is sometimes a really cool look, and you can change the letter spacing at the same time. Again, that's kind of cool. Some people do that. If by any chance you don't like what you just did and you just want to go back to normal, you just go up to the character palette. You can zero out the letter spacing, and then you can also go to the line height and just change it back to auto, and it'll go back to default settings. So you can change it at any time. That's basically how you do that, guys. A quick little recap. You just hold an alt, and you can actually change the letter spacing, and you can change the line height as well, which is really helpful, especially if you guys want to save some time and really work efficiently. So that's how you use the type tool and character tools, and I also even showed you guys how to center text and everything like that. It's all really simple stuff. In the next video, I'm going to go over typing on a path, which is a little bit more complicated, and that's really getting into more of the t-shirt designing part of this course. So we're really getting there, guys, and if you made it this far, congratulations. I'm excited for you guys that you're learning this stuff. It's really fun, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video, so I'll catch you guys there. do is drag the right one here to the right, and we're going to wait for that to snap into place. Our smart guides are going to tell us when it's actually centered. We're going to take the left one and do the exact same thing. And now what we could do is we could take the line that just went to the top, and the reason why that line's on the top now is simply because we messed with these other lines, and it's centered it is what it did. So that line is now centered on top, and it was at the bottom originally, and that will make more sense once you actually play with this. But now what we can do is we can actually drag that line to the bottom again, and that is going to center the text. And if we resize the text, you can see what it's going to do. So now it is actually perfectly centered. And all we did to center that was mess with the lines with the actual squares on them. And we put one to the left and put the right one to the right. And we messed with this line, and now it's perfectly centered. So that's all we did. And if you get lost, just pause the video, rewatch it. It will make sense, I promise you. So now we have centered text, and let's say we want text at the bottom as well. So what we could do is we can actually copy this and paste it on top of each other, and we can actually take this line and move that one to the bottom. And let me show you how that works. So I'm going to copy it real quick, and I'm going to paste it in front. So now it's in front, and I'll change the color just so you guys can see it's in front. So once you actually paste that in front, what you can do is you can take that middle line now and drag it down. So left click and hold, drag down, and now it's going to go to the bottom, and you just literally drag it until it's in the right place. And once you do that, you can let go of the left click. So right now it doesn't look very good, right? Because it's hugging the inside and this one's hugging the outside. So in order to fix that, all we have to do is go up to our character palette. Now we can't use Alt on this for some reason. We can use Alt to change the letter spacing still, but we cannot use Alt to go up and down. It just doesn't work for some reason on a text pass. So all you have to do is go to your character palette, and you need to actually change your baseline shift. So you need to go down to the baseline shift, and now you can change it using that. And you basically just do that. You're going to go into the negative numbers, by the way, but it's okay. You're going to change that until it's on the right path, and it's on the outside instead of the inside. And once you see that, you are fine. You can actually click off of it now. And we can change the color to black just like the top. So that's how it works essentially. And it's obviously really ugly, but we're going to download fonts later on and make it look much cooler. So now what you could do is you can change the letter spacing if you wanted to, just to make it fill more of the circle. But it's really up to you. I do change the letter spacing quite often depending on if I need to fill space or not. So I hope that made sense, but that's how you guys actually type on a custom path. We used a circle in this video, but you guys can use any shape you want. You can even use the pen tool to create a specific shape like a triangle and type around that triangle. So you can do whatever you want using what I just showed you. In the next video, we're going to be going over warping text, so I will see you guys there. In the last video, I typed some text around a circle path using the type on a path tool. In this video, we're going to be warping some text in order to create some really interesting effects. So what I want to do is just go to my T tool, and I'm going to type out some lorem ipsum real quick, and we're just going to change it to Udemy or whatever. We can change it to whatever we want really, and we're going to resize it as well so it's a lot bigger. And then what we do to actually warp text is we just go up to Effect, and we just go to Warp. It's really easy, guys, so make sure you go all the way up to Effect, go down to Warp. First one I want to show you is the arc one, and I don't use this very often simply because it makes the text look gross. The way I would do this is I would actually create a oval and use the type on a path tool to create some text on that oval, and that will give you a much better arc that looks a lot cleaner, and it won't warp your text like this. But there's definitely a use for it. You can change the horizontal and vertical on this, and you can create some pretty cool stuff. But again, I don't really use it too often, so I don't recommend you creating an arc like this. If we go to the top here, we can actually change the styles now. We don't have to go all the way back to the effects menu. So if we go to, let's say we go to the arc lower here, and this one I actually use a little bit more. So I'm going to set these back to 0 because I don't want that. It's warping it weird, and I just want to show you guys what it does without that. So if we 0 those out and we change the bend to more of a negative bend, we can see what it's doing. It's just bending the lower part, and I actually like that effect, and it does look cool, especially when you do a little bit more to it. But overall, I do use the arc lower more, and you can even go to wave. I mean, you can really just mess with all these, like I said. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it, but one that's really interesting is the bulge. You can create some really cool like Netflix style logos with this. In the next video, we're going to actually download some custom fonts, which is actually going to make everything look so much better, because fonts are very crucial in designing something, and if you have a bad font, it can ruin your design. So I'm going to save you guys from that, and I'm going to show you guys how to download your own custom fonts. And after that, we're going to be going over outlining text, which is also very important. So I'll see you guys there. In the last video, we went over warping text very briefly. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to actually download some custom fonts, because it's super important to have custom fonts, because it can make your design look really awesome, or it can make your design look really bad depending on what your font you're using. So I always put a lot of focus into my fonts before I start a project. I really decide which ones I like to use and which ones will fit the project that much better. There are bad fonts, guys, so you just need to be careful with what fonts you use in your design. For instance, if you have a really old Western type design and you put graffiti font on it, that might look really off, you know what I'm saying? So it's good to just know fonts, and it's good to download the right fonts for the right projects that you're working on. So anyway, we have a really basic font here. We have a Myriad Pro, and if you go right next to your character palette, if you look to the right of that, you'll see the fonts, and you can actually go to the drop-down menu, and you have a lot of selection here, guys. I mean, I have a lot more fonts than you're probably going to have, but there's a lot of selections here. That already is included with Illustrator, okay, and your computer in general. So you can really change fonts easily using that little drop-down menu. So now what we want to do is we actually want to add some fonts. So we just want to left-click on Add Fonts, which is the TK Add Fonts right here. And you know that it's there because it has the green TK icon here. So left-click on that. It's going to pull up a browser, and it's going to allow us to select a bunch of different fonts that are, like I said, included in our Adobe program. So as you can see, we have our fonts right here, and I'm just going to choose the first one just to show you guys, but you guys can go crazy and just go through all of them. Basically, you can select different classifications, different styles. Like if I go to script, it will update all this in script, and you can actually change the preview here too. So I can type in Udemy course, lowercase or uppercase, really up to you, and we can select any of these fonts and sync it with our programs. Now what happens is, when we sync this, it will work across all Adobe programs that we own, whether it's Premiere Pro, Illustrator, Photoshop, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to click the first one, and once you click that, it's going to bring up all the different font weights, and some fonts have different font weights, some don't. It really depends on the font itself. This one in particular has 4 of them, so we can either sync them all or we can just sync individual ones, and most of the time I sync them all depending on the font. If it's a good font, I'll sync them all, but for this one I really don't need all these different font weights, so I'm just going to select the last one. I'm just going to hit sync, and once you do that, it's literally going to sync it right to your program. So now when we go to Illustrator, it's going to be there, and it's called Relation Bold, so it's also kind of a good idea to keep track of the name of the font so you can find it easier. So now if I select my font and go up to fonts, I can actually either type in Relation and it will pop up that font we just had, or I can hit TK and it will only choose all the fonts that are part of the type kit. So I just hit TK, so it's selected, and it's actually dark gray, so you can tell that it's selected. And if I go all the way up to the top, my newest font's going to be there that I just synced, and it's called Relation Bold, like I said. You can just type it in top too. It really is up to you. So yeah, I'm going to hit Relation Bold, and as you can see, it has the new font. That is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be going over outlining text. In the last video, I showed you guys how to download custom fonts using Typekit. That's a service that's provided with your subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to outline your text, because oftentimes a lot of print shops, so when you go to print your designs, they're going to ask you, are your fonts outlined? And if they're not, you're going to have to outline them. So it's a very, very important thing to do. But the good news is it's super easy. All you have to do is do Shift, Control, and 0. And it will outline your text, and then your print shop's going to be really happy, and it's going to make you look like a pro, because when you send your artwork out, all your text's going to be outlined and it's going to be ready to go for the print shop. So once you outline that, you will notice something. You're going to notice that there's like blue lines bleeding into your text, and that's going to look really weird when you go to add strokes on this. So let me show you guys an example real quick. When I go to add a stroke on this font, it tends to affect it. So as you can see, it's not one shape, right? This font's not acting as one shape. Because we outlined it, it's acting as individual shapes now. So this M, for instance, is going behind the Y, which is something you might want, or it's something you might not want. It really depends on what you're going for. But basically, like, let's say if I ungroup this, I'll show you guys how this can actually work. So if I ungroup this real quick, now I have individual parts, right? So these are acting as individual shapes now, because keep in mind, it's not live text, it's outline text. So now it's acting as a shape like we're already used to creating in the previous video. So now that I'm selecting that U as an individual shape, what I can do is holding Control, and I can use the right bracket on my keyboard, and I can send that to the front. And as you guys can see, now it's actually going in the front of the D. So that's a cool way to utilize that, but I don't like the way that looks personally. So what I do is let me select everything, make it black again. get rid of the stroke real quick. So what I like to do is I like to select everything, and then I like to go to the Pathfinder and just merge it all together. And as you can see, those disappear. So now when you go to add your stroke, it's not going to look so weird. So if I add a red stroke around this or whatever, you're going to see it looks normal now. So that's the reason why I merge everything together. Now I want to go over strokes a little bit more with you guys because it still looks pretty ugly now. It's pretty easy to add a stroke, but to make the stroke do what you want it to do is another thing. So what I would like to do is I want to select everything real quick. So we already added that red stroke. Now what I want to do is click on the stroke. I want to left click on stroke, and it's going to pull up the stroke menu. And I can do a bunch of different things. I can round the corners, which automatically makes it look better. And then I can also change the alignment of the stroke. So I can go from the center, the inside to the outside, and the outside is going to look the best. So if I click outside and select off of this, you can see how much better this really looks. And you can also change the stroke size as well. So that's basically how you do that. And if you change the color, let's say we go to yellow, you're going to see that it's going to fill everything. And don't freak out when you see that. What happens is it just likes to fill all of it because this is acting as one shape. So what you do is you just zoom in on the actual font itself. So you can select different parts of it and delete it. That's something I do very often because it is kind of annoying how it does that, but it just is what it is. So again, just select the different parts with the direct selection tool and delete them. And now when you zoom out, it's going to look normal instead of being filled. And now you can fill it with any other color and you won't have any issues. So that's how you outline the text, and that's also how you add strokes to the text. And you can do that with shapes as well. And literally the same rules and principles apply to everything you do, whether it's a shape or a font. And then just to recap, we basically just outlined the text and I selected everything and I merged it all together. That's all it took. But I have some good news, guys. In the next section, we're going to be using everything that we just learned to create 3 unique shirt designs. The best part about this is I will be adding more projects for you guys to practice with, and you guys are going to be able to share your designs with me, and I'll be able to help you guys out by critiquing them and help you guys get better. And if you guys have any questions, of course, ask me. I'm always here for you. Congratulations on getting this far. I'm really proud of you guys. I will see you in the next section. We're going to create 3 awesome shirt designs. In the last video, we went over using the shape builder tool and had a ton of fun creating a custom eye shape using 2 circles. So that was really cool. But now let's say we want to create a half of a shape and reflect it to make a full shape. And that happens a lot of the time. Sometimes we want to just create half of something and then just like basically flip it and make a full shape out of it. So there's a very easy way to do that in Illustrator. So what we're going to do is use the pen tool that we already learned how to use, and we're going to create a half of a triangle out of it, and we're going to reflect it to create a full triangle. So now let's just create a half of a triangle, and I have my smart guides on, so it's going to help me, and I taught you guys how to do that in the previous video. And if you guys don't know how to do it, let's say you missed it or something, all you have to do is go up to View, and then make sure Smart Guides is on, or just do Control U on your keyboard. So now we have a half of a triangle, and there's a few ways we can actually create a full triangle of this. One way is by duplicating it. In order to duplicate it, all you have to do is hold an Alt, hover over the object you want to duplicate, and you just left click and drag to the right or left or up and down, doesn't matter, and let go. And what it's going to do is it's going to create that duplicate copy. Now what we can do is we can right click, go to transform, and we can reflect this way, and just make sure you're reflecting vertical. If you do horizontal, it's not going to look right, so do vertical, and then we can just basically drag it into place, and it will snap into place pretty much, and the smart guides will let you know when it's snapped, and you'll feel it as well. It's kind of hard to explain, but it will feel right once it's in place. And then we can merge it using the Pathfinder tool, and that's a solid object now. But I found that this way doesn't always work perfectly because sometimes your shapes can be off. If you zoom in, sometimes you can see there's some imperfections, and they basically didn't line up correctly. So in order to avoid that and make things a lot easier, what I do is I use the reflect tool, and it's really easy to use, guys. So what you want to do is you just want to go to your reflect tool, and you can find that right here. You can just hit O on your keyboard and it will go to it. Or you go to the rotate tool and just basically click on the little drop down menu, go to reflect. So before we actually reflect the shape to create a triangle, what I like to do is I like to go to my magnifying glass and I like to zoom in. And the magnifying glass can be found at the bottom right of your tool panel here. And once you find that, just zoom in real quick. If you hold an Alt, you can zoom out. But yeah, zoom in just so we can see it a little easier. So now all we have to do is actually take our reflection tool and we want to hold an Alt, and we want to go to the right side of the shape because we don't want to reflect it on the left side here. Right now the anchor point, you can see it's a faint like turquoise kind of color, is on the left side. We don't want that. We want the anchor point to be over here on this blue line on the very right side of the shape, and what that's going to do is it's going to reflect it to the opposite side to create a perfect triangle. So what we do is we hold an Alt, and you just want to left click real quick, make sure you're on that blue line, and if you're not on that blue line, it's not going to turn out right. So just make sure you're on that line, and then left click, and this reflect menu is going to pop up, and we just need to make sure we're on a few things. So we need to make sure vertical selected, preview selected, just so we can see what we're doing. If yours is like this, just check preview, and then you want to hit copy, because if you hit OK, it's just going to reflect the original shape, and we don't want that. We want to actually copy it and then reflect it. So hit copy, and now it created a perfect triangle once we hit copy. So now we have 2 copies, and that's the reason why we didn't hit OK, because it literally just would have looked like this. This one would have been gone, and it would have looked like this. So because we hit copy, and now it has 2 of them, and now what we can do is we can select them both, and we can go to our pathfinders, and we could just hit merge, and now it's one shape. So now we have one triangle, and if we create a stroke out of it, now you can see that it's a perfect triangle. That's how you can use the reflect tool to take a half shape and turn it into a full shape. And just to quickly recap, not only did we use a reflect tool to create a triangle, but we also duplicated the triangle. And all I did to do that is I selected any object we want to duplicate, and I hold an Alt, and I just left click and drag and then let go, and I can duplicate that way. So really Alt's the key there. So when you're on the direct selection tool, if you want to duplicate something, hold an Alt. So that's how you duplicate things really, really fast. In the next section, we're going to be going over creating custom types, so I will see you guys there. In the last video, we went over using the shape builder tool and had a ton of fun creating a custom eye shape using 2 circles. So that was really cool. But now let's say we want to create a half of a shape and reflect it to make a full shape. And that happens a lot of the time. Sometimes we want to just create half of something and then just like basically flip it and make a full shape out of it. So there's a very easy way to do that in Illustrator. So what we're going to do is use the pen tool that we already learned how to use, and we're going to create a half of a triangle out of it, and we're going to reflect it to create a full triangle. So now let's just create a half of a triangle, and I have my smart guides on, so it's going to help me, and I taught you guys how to do that in the previous video. And if you guys don't know how to do it, let's say you missed it or something, all you have to do is go up to View, and then make sure Smart Guides is on, or just do Control U on your keyboard. So now we have a half of a triangle, and there's a few ways we can actually create a full triangle of this. One way is by duplicating it. In order to duplicate it, all you have to do is hold an Alt, hover over the object you want to duplicate, and you just left click and drag to the right or left or up and down, doesn't matter, and let go, and what it's going to do is it's going to create that duplicate copy. Now what we can do is we can right click, go to transform, and we can reflect this way, and just make sure you're reflecting vertical. If you do horizontal, it's not going to look right, so do vertical, and then we can just basically drag it into place, and it will snap into place pretty much, and the smart guides will let you know when it's snapped, and you'll feel it as well. It's kind of hard to explain, but it will feel right once it's in place. And then we can merge it using the Pathfinder tool, and that's a solid object now. But I found that this way doesn't always work perfectly, because sometimes your shapes can be off. If you zoom in, sometimes you can see there's some imperfections, and they basically didn't line up correctly. So in order to avoid that and make things a lot easier, what I do is I use the reflect tool, and it's really easy to use, guys. So what you want to do is you just want to go to your reflect tool, and you can find that right here. You can just hit O on your keyboard and it will go to it. Or you go to the rotate tool and just basically click on the little drop down menu, go to reflect. So before we actually reflect the shape to create a triangle, what I like to do is I like to go to my magnifying glass, and I like to zoom in. And the magnifying glass can be found at the bottom right of your tool panel here. And once you find that, just zoom in real quick. If you hold an Alt, you can zoom out. But yeah, zoom in just so we can see it a little easier. So now all we have to do is actually take our reflection tool, and we want to hold an Alt, and we want to go to the right side of the shape because we don't want to reflect it on the left side here. Right now the anchor point, you can see it's a faint like turquoise kind of color, is on the left side. We don't want that. We want the anchor point to be over here on this blue line on the very right side of the shape, and what that's going to do is it's going to reflect it to the opposite side to create a perfect triangle. So what we do is we hold an Alt, and you just want to left click real quick, make sure you're on that blue line, and if you're not on that blue line, it's not going to turn out right. Last video, we worked with built-in shapes that are already in Illustrator, and we also rounded the corners using the direct selection tool, which was really great and all. But now I'm going to show you guys how to use the pen tool to create a completely custom shape. Right now I have a foreground color of black selected. Now you can either create a shape with a stroke, or you can create it as a solid object. In this one, we're going to be creating as a solid object, and I'll show you what it looks like with the stroke as well. So we're going to focus on creating a triangle in this one and a rectangle just to show you guys how it works. And I'll also do those same shapes in a stroke version just so you guys can see as well. So first thing you want to do is you want to go to your pen tool. Before using the pen tool, there's a few things that you do want to keep in mind. Every time you left click, you're creating a point. For instance, I can actually create a rectangle just by selecting a few points. So I can do one right here. I'm going to hold in shift and select another one, and we can go across and do the same thing. And I have my smart guides on, so it's going to actually tell me when I intersect the first point that we made. So as soon as I go up to the point where my first point was, it will let me know with a smart guide, and then I can left click, and then I can close it off by actually going to the original point, and you'll see a little circle appear. So we just created a perfect rectangle just using the pen tool, so that goes to show you how easy the pen tool really is to use. So now we have a rectangle, and the cool thing about this is we can actually use the direct selection tool in round corners just like we did in the previous tutorial. So you guys can see how all these tools really work together to create interesting shapes. So we can round those ones, and now we have this cool looking shape, and then we can do all the corners and make it look like a capsule more. So we have that shape. Now if I want to make a triangle, we do the same thing. We're going to select some points, and we're going to wait for the smart guides to kick in, and then we're going to close it just by going to the original point, making sure that circle appears at the bottom of our pen tool icon, and we left click, and that will close the triangle. And we can also round the triangle just like we did with the other one. We can create a circle, we can create a rounded triangle as well. So again, you guys get the point. If you guys don't see smart guides appear, don't worry. All you have to do is hit Control U on your keyboard, or you can go up to View and go all the way down to smart guides and just make sure that's selected, and then your smart guides will turn on. Now we have a rectangle and a triangle, but let's say we wanted the rectangle and triangle to be a stroke instead, because right now they're solid objects. They're black. They're filled with black. We don't want that though. Let's say we want a stroke. So all we have to do is select them, and we can actually hit this double-sided arrow right here, and that will turn them into strokes, and we can actually up the stroke size right here. So now we have strokes instead of solid fills. If you wanted to create a shape with a stroke instead of a solid fill, because right now what we did is we selected the shapes that we already created, and we just changed the background to a stroke. Now if you didn't want to do it that way and you wanted to actually have a stroke while you're using the pen tool, all you'd have to do is just make sure your stroke is whatever color you want it, select the size of it, and then change the background color to whatever you want, or just put none. So if you go to the little drop down here, you can see that. So we can actually make it any color. We can make it, let's say, red, and that's a nice poppy color, so you can see what it does there. But again, it's really up to you. So I'm going to make the same shapes right now, but I'm going to do it with a stroke instead. So as you guys can see, I already have my stroke set to 4 point, and it's on black, and I want to make sure my my inside color is like a bright poppy color so you guys can see. I'll go with this like orangish color, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like now. So if I select my points real quick, we're not going to take too much time on this, you can see that it's filling it with the color that we selected as the actual background color. So you guys get the point now of how you can actually use this to create shapes with color, with strokes, without strokes, and all that other good stuff. In the next video, we're going to go over using the Pathfinder tool to create really cool shapes as well. Welcome to section 3. In this section, we're going to be going over creating custom shapes, and in this very first video here, we're just going to use the built-in shapes that Illustrator already comes with, and we're going to do a bunch of things just using a rectangle. We're going to create an eye shape, a bullet shape, and some other cool shapes just using one shape, and it's going to be really awesome. And these are very, very useful tools to know, and they're kind of like the backbone behind merch design, because a lot of the times you're going to be creating custom shapes. It's so important that you guys know how to create custom shapes from scratch. So in this first video, like I said, we're just going to use the built-in shapes, but I promise you in the next couple videos we're going to use the pen tool and the Pathfinder tool and a bunch of other tools to create more complex shapes that are completely custom. So now we need to actually drag out a rectangle. So if you go right under the T tool, you're going to see the shapes here, okay? You can hit M on your keyboard, or you can hit L on your keyboard for the ellipse, but we're going to be using the rectangle tool. So holding in shift, I'm going to drag out a rectangle, holding in the left click on my mouse, and when you drag it out, holding in shift, it puts a perfect rectangle out there. But if I let go of shift, it will be like really unproportioned. So let's say it's like this and you hold in shift, it will actually fix it automatically. Again, it's just a perfect rectangle that way, and you don't have to worry about sizing issues or warping issues. So now we have a rectangle, and I just want to align it real quick, and I just taught you guys that in the last section. So as you guys can see, I use it quite a bit. So now we are selecting our rectangle, and as you can see on each corner, we have this white little dot with a tiny blue dot around it, and it's got this blue stroke around it. It's like literally less than 1 pixel stroke. And that's how you know you're selecting something too, by the way. So now what those circles do is they allow us to round corners, and that's very, very useful because again, we can create completely custom shapes out of just one shape. So we have a rectangle here, but we can create a circle, we can create an eye, and a lot of you probably are scratching your head thinking, how are you going to do that? So let me show you guys how we do that. So just selecting the entire rectangle, which I'm using the selection tool here to do that. So I'm just selecting it. So if you're not selecting it, you just use the selection tool or the direct selection tool, it doesn't matter. And you just drag holding your left click, and you can select something. Even if it's in a group, it doesn't matter. So now I have this rectangle selected, and now we can start doing some cool stuff. So selecting any corner, all you have to do is left click and drag in, and as you guys can see, we can create a circle out of a rectangle, and that is super awesome because you can literally create so many shapes just with a rectangle. It's crazy. So we're going to create a few more shapes. So now let's say we don't want to select the entire object. We don't want to select all the corners. We just want to select one. So now if I select off of that, or if I click off of that, and I go to my direct selection tool, here's where the direct selection tool is really useful. You can actually select any corner you want. So if we select just that bottom right corner and we drag up, we can create a pie shape out of that corner. And we can do that for all the corners. So we can do it for the top right too. And as you guys can see, it does the same thing. And now we have another pie shape using the top right corner. So you get the point. Now let's say we want to select two different corners, which oftentimes I will do. All you have to do is hold in shift with the direct selection tool selected, and you can select the bottom one as well, or whatever other one you want. And if you drag in, now you have a bullet shape. Now let's say we want to create an eye shape. All we'd have to do is select the bottom right, the top left, and drag in, and we will create an eye shape out of that. So as you guys can see, you can create a lot of shapes just out of a rectangle using the direct selection tool to select all the corners or just a couple corners or whatever you want, and then using those tiny white dots, which are anchor points, and you can use those to round the corners as well. So that's how you do that. In the next video, we're going to be using the pen tool to create a completely custom shape. Welcome to section 2. In this section, we're going to be going over the selection tool, the direct selection tool, and alignment tools. And these are all very, very crucial to creating a custom shirt design because they let you select things, drag things around the canvas or the artboard, and also align it to the artboard so things look nice and centered. So there's only one video for this section simply because these tools are actually really, really easy to use, and they're kind of just the first thing you learn how to do in Illustrator anyway. So first off, we already are selecting the selection tool, and all you have to do is hit V on your keyboard, and that will go to the selection tool. But the way it works is it allows you to drag any object or text line or basically anything around in Illustrator around the artboard, like I was telling you. So that's kind of like the main tool that you're always going to use. And then we have the direct selection tool, which allows us to select specific objects in a group. So when you have something that's grouped together and you try to select it with the selection tool, it won't let you select a specific object unless you double click on it. But if you use the direct selection tool, it will let you select that specific thing that you want. And let me demonstrate that because it might be a little confusing. So now let's say we want to group this together. So now we have a group. I just grouped those, and I just want to select the outside gray circle with my selection tool. As you can see, it's going to move everything at the same time. Only exception to that is if I double click on the object I want to select, now I can move it. And you'll know that's working because it has a strip on the top. But if you don't want to double click on things all the time, what you could do is you could just use the direct selection tool, and you can select specific things in that group. Okay, so now I can select the inside circle, move it. I can select the outside circle and move it. So that's what the direct selection tool is great for. And again, you could just double click on whatever object you want using the selection tool, and it will allow you to move it. But basically what it's doing is it's going inside that group and it's allowing you to adjust things in the group. But that can get kind of annoying. So the selection tool really helps with just saving you some time, and that way you don't have to double click on anything. But in all honesty, it doesn't matter how you do it. So definitely experiment and see what works best for you. The next thing I want to go over in this video is alignment. So oftentimes we want to align things to our artboard because either they're off-centered and we want to make sure they're completely centered with the artboard, or we want to on purpose offset them so they're not centered. And you can do that with alignment tools. So let me actually show you guys what I mean by that. So let's say we have this circle and it was up on the top left corner of our artboard here, and we wanted it completely centered right here in the middle. So how are we going to do that without having to drag it, right? And that can get annoying trying to eye things to make sure, you know, it's perfect using your eye, because your eye oftentimes is wrong. So you don't always want to rely on your eyes. So what you could do is you can actually use the alignment tools to accomplish this, and it's so much easier to use the alignment tools to do that. So the way you use them is when you select something, you're going to see the alignment tools pop up on the top here, and there's going to be horizontal align left, horizontal align center, and so forth. And when you hover over them, they will tell you what they do. But basically, you can use these to your advantage. So if let's say this is actually, let's say it's right here, right, in the center, and we want it to be on the top left corner, we can use the alignment tools to accomplish that in a second, instead of, again, trying to do it by eye, which you can, and I'm sure there's artists out there that still do it, but alignment tools surely make it so much easier to do that. So now let's say we have our design on the top left corner and we want to completely center it. So what I would do is I would select the group or the object, whatever it is, or you can use the selection tool and select multiple objects at the same time like this, and we want to center it. So all we do is we do a horizontal align center, so that will center it completely to this artboard. And then we want to vertically align it, and that's going to actually completely center it to our artboard vertically and horizontally, and it's going to be completely perfect. So that's why I use alignment tools, because it just makes things so much easier, and it saves me the hassle of trying to do it just using my eyes. So sometimes you do want things to be off-centered because you might have a specific design that calls for that. So if you wanted to, you can also align things to the corners of the artboard. You can go to the bottom, you can go to the top, but you guys get the point. Now, the cool thing about aligning things is even if you don't have objects in a group, so let's say I ungroup this, now I have two separate objects that are not in one group, okay? So I can move them separately now. So if those are all off-centered, like let's just say they're off-centered and they're ugly, right? We didn't want them there. We want them completely centered, and we want this black circle in the middle of this gray circle. The only thing you have to do to completely center those together and center them to the artboard is basically select them both and align horizontally and vertically, and they're going to be completely centered again. So that's another cool thing about it. Or you could just do one object, obviously. But you guys get the point. Sometimes we don't want things to be centered to the artboard though. We just want them to be centered together. So let's say we have two separate objects and we just want to center them together, but we don't necessarily want them to center to the artboard. All you have to do is select those objects, go up here to this little folder looking icon that says align to artboard. You click on that and you go to align to selection. Now you can just do the same thing. You just align it horizontally and vertically, and it will actually align it together versus aligning it to the artboard. That's how you align things in Illustrator. And again, these tools are really easy to use. These are just things that you guys really need to know, and you guys need to practice as well, because they make your workflow that much easier. In the next section, we're going to be creating custom shapes. So I'll see you guys in that section. Welcome to Workspace Setup. In the last video, we went over document setup and saving our document. And in this video, we're going to concentrate on just basically getting familiar with our workspace, because that's super important. And in the rest of this course, you're going to have to actually know where things are, and you're not going to be able to do that unless you get familiar with it. So this video is really going to help you guys get familiar with where everything is basically, and I'm going to try my best to explain it, because it's very, very difficult to explain workspace setup. But I'm going to do the best I can. So basically what we have here is we have a layout, right? And that's what Illustrator sees it as. It's a layout, and you can customize your layouts to whatever you want. So just to give you guys a quick rundown, everything's in a panel essentially, and you can drag those panels wherever you want to customize them. So basically on this left side here, if I go to the very top where this toolbar is, I'll see these little dashed lines that are dark. I can actually drag that panel wherever I want, and I can, let it go when I see a blue line, and it will stay there. So you can really do whatever you want with this, but I'm going to show you guys how I set it up. Now we're actually going to get into customizing the layout to the way we want it before we continue this course. So we're going to go to the top right here, and where we see layout, we're going to click that drop down menu. Now if you reset everything, this is the way it normally looks, right? But we do need to change a few things just to make it a little easier on us, okay? So one thing we're missing that's really crucial on this right hand side is we have artboards, which is important, but we don't have layers. So we want to go to window, and you can find everything in this window menu here. So when you left click on window, you're going to see all these little things pop up, right? There's going to be a bunch of different selections that you can choose from, but the one thing we need to do is click layers. And once you do that, it's going to pop up on this little panel right here. Again, you can move panels wherever you want, but we're not going to do that for this one. The only thing we want to do is go to the layers tab, and we just want to drag it over all the way to the left. We can ignore everything else. We really don't need links or libraries right now, so we can actually even close those. So I'm going to close those real quick just because I don't really need them and they're kind of in my way. So now I have layers and artboards. Those are the two most important things that we're going to be using a lot. Layers are important because that's how we can manage our design. We can create new layers for each object on our design. So that will make sense later on in the course. And artboards is important because we can create different artboards for different things that we're doing. So for instance, if we have a design right here that's a clean design, no texture, but we want to have another version of it, we can drag it to this artboard, texture it, and it's on its own artboard. So it's a good way to organize everything that you're working on. We're going to delete that artboard now. But yeah, basically that's how it works. And now our layers are there, artboards are there, so that's looking good. The next thing we're going to be using a ton is Align and Pathfinder. And those are really, really important tools because we're going to be using them throughout this whole course. You will learn a lot about those later on, so don't worry if you don't know anything about them right now. If we go to this little toolbar here, the fourth icon down is going to be Pathfinder and Align. Now, if you click that, it's going to toggle it on, and you want to leave it on at all times. Now, if you want to get rid of it, you just toggle it off, and it's right there still. You just toggle it again, and it will pop up again. But basically, we're going to be using these a lot. Another thing that we're going to be using towards the end of the course is colors, and I do have my swatches, which is good, but I don't have my color palette library out, which is included with your subscription to Illustrator. So we need to actually toggle that on. If we go to Window and you go down to Color Themes, you just click that once and it's going to pop up this Adobe Color Theme window, and we want to drag that right under the other important things, which is the Align and Pathfinder. So we just want to drag it below that so we know where it is. So once you drag that into place, and you can actually left click on it now to toggle it. And if you go to the Explore tab, which it's going to be on Create normally, if you go to Explore, you're going to see all these different color palettes, and I will be going over those more later on in this course, which is going to be very, very exciting when we actually color our designs that we make. So we're going to ignore that for now. Another thing we're going to be using a lot in this course is text. We're going to be typing out some text to create a cool design. We have a motorcycle design later on, just to give you an example, that we're going to be using text with. So it's very important that you know how to navigate to those tools. So if you hit T on your keyboard, it'll go to your type tool. So we have our T tool selected, which we will go over type in the next section. But if you go to the character palette up here and click on it, you're going to have your font selections, and you're going to have a bunch of other tools that we will be getting into, but it's important that you know where those are. And we will be going over other settings as well, just, briefly here and there. But that's the basics for you. So that's the character palette. Again, you can change the font size right here. You can change the font weight depending on what font you're using. Some fonts have different weights, which we will go over as well. But basically, you get the idea. So that's where the character palette is, and everything else really can stay the same. We really don't need anything else for this course. In the next section, we're going to be going over direct selection tools, and we're also going to go over alignment more. What's up, guys? Charley Pangus here. Welcome to section 1 of my t-shirt design masterclass here on Udemy. I am so happy to have you guys on board with this course. If you are a complete beginner, this course is perfect for you because I'm going to go over everything you need to know to create your first custom shirt design. Really exciting stuff. In this section, we're going to be going over creating a new document. I'm going to explain my process of creating a new document, which is very important for the pre-steps to creating a shirt design. In the next video, we're also going to be going over workspace setup. That's going to get you guys very familiar with the whole workspace and help you guys navigate easier. All we want to do right now is focus on the create new. So we're going to do create new. And once we do that, we're going to see this new document pop up. The new document window is super important because here's where you can actually set up the dimensions of your artboard, which is acting like a shirt in a way, if that makes sense. Your shirt is your canvas, right? So we're creating our canvas right now, and it's important that we understand the dimensions of that, okay? So typically, like for merch by Amazon and all that, they want you to set up a 45 by 5,000 pixel document, okay? So you want to design your shirts around that document size. But today I'm going to show you guys an easier way that's not only easier on your computer and helps it perform better, but it just makes everything that much smoother when you're designing, because oftentimes when we're working with large document sizes, our computers can lag and take a long time to load things. So we're going to start with the 600 pixel by 600 pixel document today, and that's again just to help our computer run smoother. And keep in mind, we're working with vector images, guys. We're not working with pixel images. When you're doing designs in Photoshop, you do want to work at a larger document size, like a 15-inch by 15-inch document at 300 resolution or something like that. But in this, we can get away with doing 600 pixels by 600 pixels simply because it is vector, which means we can blow the design up to any size without it losing any quality. Once you set that, all you have to do is hit create. And what it's going to do is it's going to create your artboard, which is awesome because now we can start doing things, right? We can actually start the whole process of designing, but we're going to get to that later on. So that's how you set up your document correctly. Now what I like to do is I like to save it just in case the program crashes and I can pull it up later on. So I could do save as, so go up to File, Save As, and we're just going to save it as whatever. We can save it as Untitled 2 as an AI file. That way we can pull it up back in Illustrator later on. So we're just basically being safe. You can click OK. You can leave everything the same. Click OK. So now our document is saved. So it, like I said, if the program crashes, we can pull up that document again or that artboard again, and it's ready to go. That's literally just to save your own butt in case anything does happen, because oftentimes Illustrator will close on you. It will just stop working and you'll have to restart the program. So it's important to save ahead of time. So we just created a new document at 600 pixels by 600 pixels. And we also saved our document just to make sure that if Illustrator crashes, we can pull that document back up and we're ready to go. So our files are safe now. And in the next video, we're going to go over workspace setup. I'm going to get you guys very familiar with the workspace. That way, when you guys are watching my other tutorials in the next sections, it's going to make a lot more sense and it's going to be easier for you to navigate. So I'll see you guys in the next video. What is up, guys? Charlie Pangus here. Welcome to my t-shirt design masterclass, where I'm going to teach you guys everything you need to know in Illustrator to create a custom t-shirt design. That's right, guys. I'm going to take you from beginner level to advanced level, and you guys are going to be creating your own custom t-shirt designs in no time. Not only am I going to show you guys how to use the tools in Illustrator to create a custom shirt design, but at the end of this course, I have 3 projects for you guys. We're going to be creating a custom shirt graphic, and I'm going to walk you through the entire process. So we're going to go from the start of a shirt design to the end of a shirt design, finalizing it, and I even have some bonus tips and tricks at the end of this course to show you how to color a design, color separate the design for print, and all this other good stuff. So it's a great course full of information. Best part about this course is I will be updating it very often, so you guys will always have new content to look at, new tutorials to practice your skills on. I'll be checking the Q&A section very, very often to answer your guys' questions as they come. And that's the goal here, guys. I want you guys to go from beginner to advanced level really, really quickly in this masterclass. I don't want you to have to take any other class. I want this to be the only class you need to become a t-shirt design master. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this course, and I cannot wait to start teaching you guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the course. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you guys a really cool texture hack that you could do solely in Illustrator, so you don't need any outside resources to do this. You can do it all in Illustrator, and actually a good buddy of mine showed me this method, and shout out to him. His name is Jordan, Jordan Jameson. He's a great designer, and he showed me this method, and it's one of my favorite methods now. So I'm basically passing it on to you guys. There's a couple ways we can actually go about texturing our designs using this method, and let me actually show you a few of them right now. So right now I have 2 artboards. I'm just going to create one more artboard, and I'm going to take the design that doesn't have texture. Let me grab it real quick. We're going to take it. I'm just going to duplicate it. So I basically duplicated it. I'm going to put it on this artboard, and I'm going to show you the first method right now. We're going to create one more artboard for the second method, because I'm going to show you guys 2 different ways of doing this. For this first method, I'm actually going to be focusing on texturing just the black, not the background or anything like that. On the second method, we're going to focus on texturing everything, not just the black. So the way this method works is basically we're going to click on the design, and we're going to go up to Object, and we're going to actually rasterize it, okay? And once we click rasterize, this rasterized box will pop up. So in order to add texture just to the black and not the background, what we want to do is we want to go to background, and we just want to hit transparent. And we're going to click OK. We're not going to mess with anything else. So we're going to click OK. Now this is rasterized with a transparent background. Now what we want to do is we want to go up to Effect. We want to go down to Pixelate, and we want to go to Mesotint, and this is where the magic's going to happen with the texture, and this is where we're going to be able to control what kind of texture we want on our design. So if we go down to Type, we have grainy dots selected. Now we can go to medium dots, we can go to fine dots, but for this one I really want them to be shown. I want that texture to be dominant, so we're actually going to go to coarse dots. And then what's going to happen is you're going to see all the texture apply, but it's not quite done yet. As you can see, it looks pretty blurry. So what we need to do is we actually need to do a image trace on this, which I'll show you right now. So selecting the actual artwork, we're going to go to image trace. And when you go to image trace, you're going to see this pop up, but you just want to click OK on that. You don't need to worry about that. And then what it's going to do is it's going to actually image trace it. Now,
what we could do is we can fine tune the image trace, because right now it's looking pretty good. It's not bad, but if you wanted to add like a little bit more detail to it, you can actually click on this little image trace panel right here, right next to tracing results. So what that's going to do is pop up this image trace box right here, and here we can actually adjust different settings in order to get different detail out of this image. So we can get more detail or less detail depending on what we're going for, but for the sake of this actually looks pretty good. So the only other thing I would really do to this is actually ignore white under options, because I don't want that white background to show. But when you click that, it's going to lose some detail. So what we can do is we can actually lower the noise, and it's going to add some detail back to this image. And we can also mess with the threshold a little bit as well and get some of that detail back. And as you can see, some of that texture is coming back. Then we're going to go ahead and expand it. And as you guys can see, we have that texture now. So now if we move this outside of our artboard, you can see that it's transparent with that texture. So now we're going to move on to our second artboard here that we created. And now I want to focus on adding the texture everywhere. So it's basically going to be the same exact method that we just did, but we're just going to not make it transparent instead. So let's go ahead and go up to Object. We're going to rasterize it. And this time we're going to make the background white. So if we were to move that outside of the artboard, you guys can see what it looks like. So as you can see, it has a white background now. That's exactly what we want. So now what we can do is go up to Effect, and we could just apply that meso tint that we just did on the last design that we used a transparent background on, and it's going to apply the same exact one, but only this time it's going to have it on the background, since we chose a white background versus a transparent background. Now if this confuses you, just pause the video, go back and watch it again. It will make sense, I promise you. So now what we want to do is do the same exact thing we did last time. We want to image trace it, and we want to actually say do not show again. We don't care about that. We're just going to click OK. So now when we do that, it's going to show it on the background as well, not just the black. So what I would like to do is ignore the white now. So this is actually transparent. So I'm actually going to put it outside of the artboard real quick, and I'm going to go up to the image trace panel. I'm going to ignore white real quick, and it's probably going to lose some texture detail, but that's completely fine. What we could do is we could just adjust some settings as far as noise and threshold goes and add some of that back. So let me lower the threshold to 76, see what that does. We can even do it a little bit more than that. And we can keep messing with these settings. We can even raise the pass level percentage and see what that does. See, we get a little more detail at it, but that looks pretty good. As you guys can see, we lost some of the background detail, but that's okay. We could just lower the noise again. See if we can add some of that back. Basically, it's a balancing act is what it is. So we can add some of that threshold back. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now we can actually go ahead and expand this. And as you guys can see, it does have some background detail, some background texture. If you wanted to delete some of the background texture, what you could do is just click on the design, and then you can go to the eraser, and basically it will show, it will highlight all the texture in this purple color, this bluish purple color. And then you can basically just delete it with the eraser. The only reason why I would use this method is basically to show some particles like coming off of the design, making it look like the design's kind of breaking up a little bit, and it gives it a nice vintage look. So that is the final design with some of the background deleted. All I did was selected the artwork and went to the eraser and just basically deleted some of the background. I only want it to be very faint. I didn't want it to be really intense or anything like that. There you have it, guys. That's my quick Illustrator texture hack. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys love this tutorial and you're thinking, man, Charlie, I just want more of them and I need more of them now, please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already. And also, if you guys really love the artwork in this video, that is from my clothing line. It's called Street Dwellers. If you guys want to check it out and pick some stuff up, it's just streetdwellers.com. I'll put the link in the description as well. And of course, if you guys want to win a $100 store credit to Droid Watches, I will also have the giveaway details in the description below. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll catch you guys in the next video.